Good evening and welcome to the grand opening of our new railway station. As one of the features of the celebration, we are offering a prize to the person who can guess the number of bodies which will be found in these lockers during the first week of operation. Station lockers seem to be a favorite spot to check one's friends. It's much more tidy than having them lay around the house. In this connection, we have a very interesting feature. Our architect thought of everything, just on the possibility that bodies might not be discovered as quickly as they should. All the lockers are refrigerated. I knew you'd like that. Now that I have given you that chilling thought, we should best be getting on with the principal business of the evening.
Welcome to the Shamley Silhouette, yet another analysis of the master of suspense, Alfred Hitchcock. I am your host, Zach Eastman. This is the first episode we have recorded since the world decided to stop all of a sudden. It really wasn't all of a sudden. We should have seen it coming. I mean, shouldn't we see? We saw some foreshadowing happening, you know, like some movie notions that were pre-warning us that, hey, something bad might happen. But alas, we're here. Yeah, we're still in the middle of the COVID-19 outbreak. We're here in Colorado. We're moving to safer at home, but we are trying our best to limit the contact that we have with each other as much as possible. Here at the Shamley Silhouette, thankfully, we have plenty of options in terms of how to get guests on board and also to record those in the best quality imaginable. Obviously, going forward, not every episode is going to sound super awesome because of the teleconference that we're going to have to utilize in order to continue the show, but we're going to keep it going, and consequently COVID-19 has also created an issue with the original intended end date of this series. I was originally planning to end it in July, not too long after the first episode had dropped last year, and consequently lives have been shifted around, mine included. I had to reassess my employment situation as well as making sure that people who were going to be on board were still on board and giving them time to adjust. So that being said, this is the first of a couple of different ones we're recording to get us to the end point. We're going to have plenty of discussions about Hitch, obviously. We're going to do our best to tackle what we can to get us to the end point. For any of the films that we don't cover, I am going to be doing an appendices after the final episode, and it'll be consistent of some mini reviews of Hitch films that we didn't get to cover in detail, so that you don't feel like you've been cheated too much. And who knows, Shamley Silhouette may come back around as a different thing for Hitchcock, where we get to examine those films even more deeply. But the goal of the Shamley Silhouette was to examine the different facets of Hitchcock, his themes, his motifs, certain trends in his films, and also talk a little bit about Hitch himself. The coming episodes you're going to hear will consist of some more discussions of Hitch's misfires, but also covering his British period, so they're kind of be in tandem a little bit, and we'll be doing that with Marshall Rosales. We're going to do an episode on Ingrid Bergman and her collaboration with Hitch, which will have our guest, or our returning first guest ever, Ryan Frost, to come on board and talk about the legacy of the Bergman-Hitchcock collaboration. I'm going to have Henry on for another episode. It's still to be determined. I will be getting Brad on for an episode. Whether that comes in the middle of the series or after the series is still to be determined. As this has been focusing mainly on the films, it might be a situation where we do it afterwards in an appendices. And then we're also going to be talking about Marnie. That will be an episode. And right now, it looks like Jack Hanley is going to be coming on board to discuss that with us as soon as we get his schedule figured out. And then I'm going to announce it here on our final episode. We were very, very lucky in March to speak with none other than the host of The Secret History of Hollywood and Attaboy Clarence, Adam Roach, who will be coming to your earbuds to talk a little bit about his journey with Hitch, and then also to just talk about Hitchcock in general and wrap this sucker up. But on to today's show. So we've been talking a lot about different facets of Hitchcock and his movies, different themes, different motifs. Amongst the things that he helped kind of pioneer for a mainstream audience is noir. Whether it's his beginnings in the silent film era, working with German expressionism and dense shadows in order to create menace within a situation, or just dealing with the seedy material that he had dealt with over the course of his entire career. In episode 8, or episode 7, I should say, we discussed, amongst other things, the legacy of Hitchcock through 4 different films that covered his angle on the serial killer and the psychopath. But Hitchcock made 2 films, not too far apart from each other, that tackled the murderer or the psychopathic killer, but from a very different stanza point. In fact, it dealt mainly with its intrusion on hometown America and just common America in general at the time. In 1943, he started out by terrorizing a town called Santa Rosa, California. And then in 1951, he took it all the way to the capital of the United States of America. I speak, of course, of 1943's Shadow of a Doubt and 1951's Strangers on a Train. And here to discuss this with me is a returning guest. You know him, you love him, you can't get enough of him. And this is a film that he talked about in his first appearance as something he'd want to talk about, was Strangers on a Train. So we're not only going to talk about that, but we're going to also throw a new curveball at him. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back Aaron Pendergast.
Hey, Zach, thanks for having me back.
You're
Hopefully
alive.
people aren't tired of hearing from me.
You're alive. No, I'm glad to hear from you.
I am. I'm here. I'm still somehow breathing.
You're somehow breathing. How have you been keeping up through everything?
Pretty good. I think, are fortunate compared to a lot of people. My wife and I are both able to continue working on a remote capacity, and so that's keeping us busy, but we also live in a very tiny condo, so that is less ideal.
Oh, yeah, so this is turning into a rope situation. One of you is going to kill the other one, stuff it in a chest in the living room, and then you'll have friends over when the quarantine breaks, and then one of them will be Jimmy Stewart.
No comment.
No comment. Oh! Wow! I was able to read into your mind a lot more than I thought I would be able to. So, we're going to be talking about, obviously, Hitchcock kind of diving into hometown America and or the heartland of America even, and kind of how he angles in on that. Now, you had seen Strangers on a Train prior. What was your initial reaction when you first saw that movie?
Strangers on a Train? Oh, gosh. I've always liked noir films, and given that it is in that vein, I really enjoyed it, particularly, and this comes up in, sorry, Shadow of a Doubt. Sorry, my brain's slow today.
Yeah.
Both, just lighting techniques, I really like noirs for the hard shadows, the bright highlights. It's one of those things, for me, lighting in a movie makes or breaks it, and bad lighting is bad. What's funny with noir films is the lighting is so exaggerated, it doesn't look natural, but it's also, when done well, I enjoy the look of it, even though it's not natural. Right. Whereas in other situations where you do that, it doesn't work at all, and it bothers me. So, that movie in particular, I really liked that. And I also just kind of enjoyed the random encounter that turns into this, much larger thing. Mm-hmm. Hard to believe, but also makes for a great story. So
yeah, it's a story that based on Patricia Highsmith's book, by the way, that I think taps into the most simple fears and paranoias we can possess. Is just some random stranger is going to ruin your life all of a sudden. And it definitely, it's a film that when you go back to it, and we'll talk about it further, obviously, later in the episode, but it's a film that I think still strikes a chord despite being a little more dated, And what's interesting is how much it holds up. Like, many of the films we've discussed on this podcast do have elements that date themselves more often than not. And I think that this one in particular has a lot of elements that prevent it from aging too bad. Like, even Psycho, there's different things that age it, whether it's the amount of money that that's being embezzled, or if it's just the fact that motel off the highway and stuff like that, and just like how frequently are people staying at motels as opposed to maybe a bed and breakfast. But Strangers on a Train, we've still got a local light rail line. Like, feasibly, you could do this story with public transportation. So. Right.
Well, and even with the mention that it's in the nation's capital. I mean, DC has one of the best subway systems in the U.S. So
yeah,
even that alone, like, it's not a traditional train, but it's the same kind of concept. So I think it does do well to be set in that environment.
Yeah. And on top of that, many of the different facets that we'll discuss, like, the motivations and even the psychological elements still hold up pretty well, as compared to some that grew over time in order to address specifics. And then you were saying to me before you started the show, I don't want to out you here, but you hadn't seen Shadow of a Doubt up till this point.
That is correct. Yeah, I will admit, like, I've enjoyed Hitchcock's films that I've seen, but I would never claim to have seen all of them, or even a significant percentage of them. But
you motherfucker! Why do you do this? Why don't you watch good movies?
But to that end, yeah, it was interesting to watch. To see one that I had not seen before, and looking at it with that kind of more critical eye, because a lot of these I'd seen when I was, somewhat younger and interested in film, but not really, like, to an extent, a lot of the Hitchcock I saw was before I even knew I was going to have an interest in being a filmmaker. So
right.
My perception of it in that context was different than it is now.
Yeah. No,
it changes how you look at a movie, I think.
Oh, it definitely does. I mean, like, when you're a kid and you're watching something like Psycho or Strangers on a Train, even, like, you're terrified of Robert Walker or Anthony Perkins and stuff, and then as you get older, you start seeing the different character twitches that they add to it to make them like deeper than they probably would under any other director or any other screenplay. So like the mood changes. So it's actually good that you saw Shadow of a Doubt at the time that you did, because I didn't see it until college. This is one that I didn't watch early on. And it was one that I watched once. I liked it a lot, but I mainly liked it for watching more Joseph Cotten, and because I was really into Orson Welles at that point in college. And as I've gotten older and rewatched it, it's a film that sticks with me as a great, like, it's almost a primarily perfect Hitchcock movie, because it's utilizing nearly every one of his best tricks within the scope of one film. I mean, it doesn't have the same crew as, say, the films of the 50s where you have, Robert Burke or Edith Head and Bernard Herrmann, but it possesses the 40s version of that, which is utterly fascinating. And Strangers on a Train is one that I saw early on, and like it was one that was not one of my favorites. But then as like Shadow of a Doubt, as I've grown older, it's become one that's utterly fascinating to re-examine and explore, not just from the Hitchcock angle, but also from the noir angle, because the thing is that Hitchcock had made a lot of films similar to the noir vein, but these two are specifically designed in that noir feel and style. The shadows are harsh, the circumstances are very seedy and underbelly, and they're all taking place under the veneer of what seems to be the American norm, and that's something that is very prevalent in post-war era filmmaking, when a lot of noir is coming out, whether it's your Double Indemnity or half the stuff that Bogart was able to do when he wasn't working with John Huston specifically. So it's these two are going to be interesting to talk about. So with that in mind, we're going to jump right in and just talk about these two films back to back, and kind of talk about how they it's weird because Shadow of a Doubt and Strangers on a Train mirror each other in interesting ways, not just from the visual motif, but also from thematic stuff. So we're going to jump right into it with Shadow of a Doubt in 1943, directed by the guy we've been talking about for how many episodes now. Made on Universal's dime during the time that he was under contract to Selznick. Selznick, as we have been discussing, loaned him out a bunch because Selznick couldn't necessarily complete any projects he wanted to, so he would make a tidy buck off of loaning out his talent to other studios. Hitchcock, absolutely one of them. So it's produced by Jack H. Skirbel. And the screenplay is a very fascinating situation. So the story comes from Gordon MacDonald, who was the husband of the head of David O. Selznick's story department. And so they got the story from them, and they took it over to Universal and loaned out Hitch. And the screenplay was given a thorough runaround by none other than Thornton Wilder, who, if you don't know who Thornton Wilder is, but you've seen Our Town, now you know who wrote Our Town. So, like the classic example of small town America on the stage. And by all accounts, Thornton Wilder and Hitch got along famously, and there was no interference. No disturbance. There was no disagreement over what this is. Basically, Hitchcock and him saw eye to eye on how to bring the menace into small-town America, which at the time had not really been thoroughly examined. Now, when we talk about menace in film, we usually think of it within an urban setting, within the city, but rarely had it been brought into the more quieter towns of America. This is like prior to the like suburban expansion. So a lot of these stories never really went past, New York City or even Los Angeles. So this is an interesting setting and tone for it, and getting somebody like Wilder really helps that scenario. They bring on an additional writer, Sally Benson, and Alma Revel, coming in to fully shape this script. Hitchcock has called this film his favorite that he's made, and I think it's primarily because of one is Pat Hitchcock is correct when she says that he definitely likes bringing that menace into a small town. Like, he liked that concept and the idea, but I think it's also it looks like this is one of those films where he had very little trouble making the film. Like, there was very little interference, rarely was something not going his way, and he valued his wife immensely, and so to have her working directly on a screenplay, and I'm sure that thrilled him to no end. And amongst other things, you get the introduction of some people that would go on to work with Hitch further. We have returning to the art department as Robert Boyle. And then we have Dmitri Tiomkin doing the score with additional work by Franz Lehar. And we get the introduction of Hume Cronin in this movie, not just to Hitchcock's oeuvre, but also to film in general, because up till then he had not been in a film. But the main build stars of this film will go down the docket here: Teresa Wright, Joseph Cotton, MacDonald Carey, Patricia Collinge, and Henry Travers. So there's a lot of very high-class talent working on this project. Joseph Cotton, in particular, a friend to the Hitchcocks. Cotton was best known for working with that other fat director. You know who I mean.
And Joseph Cotton is great in this movie.
Oh, he's fantastic.
He's so good.
Talk about a guy who 2 years prior in Citizen Kane, playing the very lovable and sympathetic Jebediah, is now suddenly this enormous monster. Like, just an enormous monster. Like the scary thing under your bed, that is Uncle Charlie.
Right.
And
it's also like a lot of Hitchcock stuff based on a true story that someone wrote a 9-page outline for, basically, and then they expanded on it. Which I think is part of my enjoyment of the film. Is I, like everyone else in 2020, like true crime stuff. Mm-hmm. And so taking, a true crime thing and using it to inspire something in a fictional narrative. Landscape is also something that is enjoyable, because then I dig into, well, what inspired it and what did this guy do, you know? So I think that adds like a layer of interest to it, at least for me personally.
Yeah,
this movie.
Let's touch on that a little bit. So it's partially based on the life of Earl Nelson, known as the Gorilla Man, the Gorilla Killer, and the Dark Strangler. He was, serial killer. And this is what's interesting is now we'll label this as a serial killer. At the time, films especially were not really labeling people like Mr. Nelson as a serial killer. They'd call him a crazed murderer or a maniac or something of that nature. But the term serial killer had not been fully established.
I think that was the 80s that they came up with that term.
More like in the mid to late 70s, early 80s, when you have Jack Douglas coming into the FBI to start doing his criminal profiling stuff. Which, guys, if you're not watching Manhunter, watch Manhunter, because I want a third season of Manhunter. Manhunter.
It's really good.
David Fincher's Manhunter. Anyway, but much like our Uncle Charlie, many of Nelson's victims were middle-aged landladies who he would find through a room for rent, and then the crimes are very unspeakable. We're not going to go too full into that, but the bottom line is that this is another situation where Hitchcock is taking an influence on real life and then transplanting it into a film prospect. And that's suffice it to say, the story that McConnell was able to conjure up definitely falls into Hitch's wheelhouse, to say the least. But we'll jump right into the plot right now, because right off the bat, we're like from the opening credits on, we're treated to imagery that will permeate the film, which is the Merry Widow Waltz. This constant line of people in dress in the gay 90s dancing the night away under the Merry Widow Waltz, which is a theme that constantly finds itself strewn about this film. And right off the bat, Hitchcock is setting up the motif of what's going on in Charlie's mind. So we're very clear on even when as we find out later on why Charlie identifies with that imagery, we're already being set up with a very interesting, very different type of setup for a film, which I don't think he even gets to do that much in opening credits at this point in his career.
I do really, we're going to get into the plot, but especially the beginning of this film, you see, Joseph Cotton, Uncle Charlie, laying on a bed. His landlady comes in, lets him know some men were looking for him. And what I really like is this kind of intro setup. You know that he's done something, right? Yeah. People are looking for him. You don't know who they are. I was wondering, did he steal money? Did he kill somebody? And of course his landlady makes mention of the money laying around the room.
Yeah. And we see,
which to me says, he's probably stolen something. So I didn't go... your start, like, out of the gate, you're wondering what's up with this character.
Yeah.
But because he's the first character you're introduced to, I even want to think, like, well, he's probably not a bad guy. That's kind of how I started it out, was like, well, he's got this money, but maybe he stole it from bad people.
Yeah, he stole it from Charles Foster Kane after Charles Foster Kane fired him from the paper, and that's why he's sitting around in a one boardroom house. Like, I would be pissed too. A toast, Jebediah, to you sleeping in a one-bedroom apartment on my terms. But yeah, no, that opening image of him, like, and we use a lot of mirror imagery in this film, and that'll come into play here in a second, but that opening image, we show an insert of the money, we show an insert of his squalor. Prior to that, we're outside in an urban city. So right off the bat, we're starting off in the place that crimes of this nature are normally supposed to be taking place in, according to the cinematic language that we've been used to up to this point. So we're starting off some kids in the street playing stickball, and that must have been fun for Hitchcock to direct stickball. Like, okay, you go to that base there, you go to that base there, play ball. So we're getting that imagery of Hitchcock dealing with what you're expecting, and then he's going to flip it on you. So the landlady comes in. She informs him that two men were looking for him, and he is already aware that he's being tailed. Like, he already knows. Like, he's done this before. So without knowing exactly what Charlie is guilty of, we know that something's up. So that's very much Hitchcock sets a lot of bombs under the table in this film, and this one in particular has a ton going on. And he sets them up as early as this first scene. Something's up. Now we're going to have the suspense of what's going on. That's going to come to a head by the close of the film. So and it's done very well, because I found myself, again, even like as a modern viewer, not knowing anything about the movie or seeing it before, constantly wondering, well, what did he do? Like, what's going on? And like hoping, like looking for clues and things to what it is before you find out. And really, you don't find out until young Charlie does, but we'll get into that. Well, I'll tell you what he is thinking. He's thinking, man, I told this landlady to leave me alone, and she will not leave me alone. She stays there. I noticed this, like, upon viewing it today. She stays there longer than I remember each time, because she's like, it's like a good 1 to 2 minutes of her just repeating the same information. Now it works because you're setting up in the viewer's mind, okay, this is what this is what Charlie's dilemma is. But she stays there so long, and like she at a certain point, Charlie gives up trying to get her to go away by saying, yes, I've got it, by saying, like, you know what's interesting? These two men say they've been looking for me, but I've never met them. So he's already kind of telegraphing to the audience, hey, I'm not a great guy, like, or at least people don't like me. So the shades go down. He's left in the room to think. He leaves the boarding house, passes by the two people who are tailing him, and there's a POV shot earlier of him looking out the window, and we see the people that are tailing him. Right. He goes past them, and the two start tailing him, and for a good, I want to say a minute, we're treated to some good old pure cinema from Hitch, where we see essentially a chase sequence. And what's interesting about this film, outside of any other Hitchcock film you see in this period, I feel like he has much more control of what's going on. I did not look into if this particular section was shot on a studio lot. It looks like it probably was. As opposed to the Santa Rosa stuff. But you can tell where something clearly had to be on a location. But he gets to do a lot of tricks that he would have otherwise done in a silent film, where the Tiomkin's score is really playing along to that silent film beat. So as the two detectives' feet move, the music moves. As Charlie moves, the music moves. So he's able to kind of play around with the silent film motif as long as he can in this movie, and he gets more opportunities than you'd expect, especially of a film of this era where dialogue is, a little bit more prevalent than it would. Essentially, like, it's better to have a little more talking and get those actors engaging with each other, but he manages to pull out a lot more silent film moments than you'd expect in this film. Yeah, definitely. It's interesting too, because it happens at a lot of different moments, but it really adds to the the mystery and the tension of things when you have those. Yeah, absolutely. And it gives us again, like, we're telling, not show, or we're showing, not telling. So, it's always a treat when we can get that with Hitch. So, from there, he sends a wire to his sister in Santa Rosa, California. And what I love about this moment is that as he's sending the telegram saying, I'm going to arrive, and don't try to tell me no, I'll wire you with further instructions. Send it to Santa Rosa, California. Santa Rosa, California, and then it fades to Santa Rosa, California. I like that kind of transition. So we don't need a Chiron. We don't need anything like that. The story is naturally moving it along with it. It's a little convenient, but at the time, this must have been a very... but it's not even just, it's standard, you can do this, but like it would feel a lot more natural, because now we're suddenly away from the urban setting, and now we're into Santa Rosa, this small town, this right. Mom and pop shops everywhere as far as the eye can see. And it's funny you mention it, because that's a really clever way of introducing it, and I didn't even
think about it when it happened. But now that you're saying it, I'm like, oh yeah, they did. He just kind of said, send it to Santa Rosa, and we transitioned, and I was like, this must be Santa Rosa. Like, it wasn't even a question of where we are now, you know?
It's just like, no, this is where we are. You know, if they don't get it, that's their own fucking fault. I'm giving them virtually everything on a platter. If they don't, I'm not going to put letters up there. I can't dumb down the audience. It's just not going to happen today. So yeah, we're in Santa Rosa, California, and it's a small town. It's small town Americana. This is the Americana a lot of people are wishing would come back. You know, and you got a traffic guard in the middle of the street. Got people walking to and fro from their little shops, little towns. They got a little church there, a First National Bank, and we're whisked away into the home of the Newtons. We meet a lot of people at the Newton household. We should probably talk a little bit about each one of them. We have, of course, Emma Newton, Charlie's sister and young Charlie's mother, played by Patricia Collins, who I think she gives a fantastic performance in this film as clearly a woman who was very clingy with her brother and very protective of Charlie. And we find out later a good portion of why that probably is. But she's a little bit aloof, I guess would be the terminology for it. So she's not like, she doesn't stand on her own 2 feet the way her daughter does.
Right, and I think it's an interesting use of character in, you know, as with the daughter Charlie, young Charlie, or however we want to refer to her. It is, and I mean, we can get into this with comparisons later, but it's interesting, you know, when we're talking, like, what I like about Hitchcock's movies is the main protagonist that drives the action is not always the same archetype.
Yeah, no, he switches it up a bunch.
Yeah, and so I do really enjoy, you know, her character and the way she is established and played in this movie as being very strong and independent and verbose and having crazy ideas like telepathy and stuff. Is, you know, and it's great because a lot of people dismiss her, but it really is, you know, she does kind of have a better sense of what's going on.
There's definitely there's no confirmation of telepathy, but there's an allusion to it. Like, Hitchcock's like, no, I'm not going to make a fucking mutant movie, but I want to allude to the fact that they could be mutants. I think that this would be very helpful in the future when some dork in New York makes a comic book series about a man with Wolverine claws. I think we should give them a head start. What do you say, gentlemen? But there's the father, Joseph Newton. He's kind of nothing, but he's I hate to say it. Henry Travers does really good with him. What's interesting, I shouldn't say he's nothing, because he has a friend named Herbie Hawkins, played by the one and only Hume Cronin. And what I love about it is that the father character in this film, if he didn't have a friend like Herbie, he'd be bored out of his mind throughout this entire movie, because the majority of his shots show him befuddled, scared, or confused by Uncle Charlie.
Right.
Just really trying to process the family dynamic between Charlie and Emma. But he has his moments. Obviously, he's a doting father, an adorable father. So much so that his youngest daughter Anne does not understand him. In fact, Anne doesn't understand most people. She's very interested in books. She's very well educated for a person of her age, and she also knows that she doesn't want to be bothered by writing a telegram down for her family. Like, this is in an age before readily accessible voicemail or text message. You know, she clearly just didn't give a shit.
Right. Yeah. No, it is pretty funny.
I tried to find a pencil, I swear.
Yeah. No, it's funny because she's very, she seems very intelligent and very polite and very not like how I expect children to behave.
Yeah. Unlike our last episode that we discussed precocious children.
Right. And so she seems very, it's just funny to me that, she couldn't be bothered to write down the message.
No, but she's very busy reading Ivanhoe, obviously. So, and
clearly, yes.
Props to her. I will say that Hitchcock tends to make the daughters in his films rather well-educated, headstrong, very, able to hold their own. And you can't tell me that Anne Newton is not the smartest person in the room. You just can't tell me that she's not the smartest person. She up until Charlie figures out what's going on, she's the one who's sniffing out trouble first head on. Hats
absolutely.
off. And now her brother Roger doesn't know his ass from a hole in the ground. He is just a regular, good old American boy who counts the steps from the drugstore to home.
Yeah, pretty much. It is funny. His character is very much
I am so
peripheral. It is not.
Yeah, it's basically us, Aaron. It's us as kids. I'm so sorry that I had to bring you to another Hitchcock movie with an annoying boy, but here we are.
It's all right. I didn't find him that annoying. I just found him to be very unnecessary. Isn't the word, but he's very just. Passive in everything that goes on.
Yeah, he's just
present, but not like an active participant in any scene.
Yeah, the only time he gets close to it is with the paper scene. Outside of that, he's just saying facts that are good. It's good filler to weave the conversations at the dinner table together.
Pretty much, yeah.
But he's not, I will say, he is not as annoying as the brat we discussed in Man Who Knew Too Much from 1956. He is far from giving anybody trouble. If anything, he's much more well behaved by comparison.
Right.
So, and
I think in a way he shows us what young Charlie saw in Uncle Charlie when she was younger, because obviously she knows him and she likes him as an uncle.
Yeah.
And in this movie, you can tell the younger brother is very taken with Uncle Charlie and wants to sit with him and ride with him and all of that stuff. And so I think that kind of gives us insight into how she formed her perceptions of him prior to this film.
Yeah, young kid idolizing somebody that's not their parents. And and it's so in a sense, yes, he is very much, I would say it's the most subtle allusion to that in the film, because it's rarely addressed. But if you're watching this film as many times as you are, you do see things like that. And in this case, it informs how somebody like Charlie Newton would idolize her uncle, and idolize him so much that she is going to run off and send a telegram to ask him to come to their small town and break the boredom. Let's talk about it's Teresa Wright, by the way, who is a fantastic actress in such stuff as Mrs. Miniver, Pride of the Yankees with Gary Cooper, and Best Years of Our Lives, which she gives a wonderful performance in too. I think that Charlie it's so interesting how that version of a teenager in this particular movie is very, very timeless. Because half the teenagers you see in movies, in terms of if we're doing a high school movie, or I would call it an Alexis Bledel mid 2000s movie, they've got problems, they've got their angst, and they express it in the form of, this whole town is boring, something needs to happen.
Right.
Just
well. And it's funny because she ultimately gets her wish, but it is not at all what she wanted for the excitement she was looking
you want
for.
Excitement, huh? Well, how about I bring you your murderous uncle? Thank you. I'm Hitchcock. Just, if there's any form of and there's just and again I was talking about earlier, the mirroring image. She's on the bed, and the first time we see her, she's on the bed just like her Uncle Charlie. So there's also there's the intimation that she possesses so much of Charlie that she would either A, follow in his footsteps, or B, be smart enough to sniff it out. But she's so infatuated with him that it's more that she sees the connection more than anything else, that she's blinded by that up to the midpoint of the movie.
Right. Well, and in her defense, she definitely knows something is going on.
Yeah.
but she's not sure what it is. And I think that speaks to, again, it's like she can't fathom that this person she's idolized is a bad person. So there's something going on that he's not talking about, but she's not thinking anything bad.
No.
Which goes back to that idea of bringing this, bringing the monster or the killer or the crime to small town America, is that, like, why would you think that? We live in Santa Rosa, California. It's a small town. Everybody knows everybody's name.
Yeah.
Like, why would that happen?
Yeah, and it's the question that permeates your mind, and like, no matter how many times they did it in film, it's not really until the 80s that you start that this starts to become passé. But this film kind of innovates it to a certain respect. Obviously, other films had like tackled similar-ish issues before, but like after Shadow of a Doubt, you do get a series of films that talk about like that disruption in paradise, so it were. And a lot of radio dramas of the era do this as well, whether it's The Whistler or Suspense. So, Uncle Charlie is met at the train station. Hitchcock has said that the train coming in with the black smoke coming out of the smokestack is a symbol of it was intentional to signify the evil that's coming into the town. To talk about, like, there's some imagery that he'll acknowledge and not acknowledge. Like, he won't acknowledge the imagery of the oven and torn curtain, but this one he will. So, like, clearly which films he prefers. So,
and we're not, this might be jumping the gun a little bit, but I'm starting to think that Hitchcock had some kind of fetish with choking.
There's a lot of choking in his movies. There is and I think it stems back to, this is the old-fashioned way you portray a murder on screen, because you're not allowed to show a knife going in or anything like that. So this is it's
the one thing you can get away with at this point.
It's similar to how things need to be ciphered or covered up in terms of an allusion to violence of any kind, whether it's just regular violence, sexual violence, anything of that nature. It always has to be portrayed in a certain way, and I guess strangling, it seems like it's a motif that's in a lot of silent films of the era. Not to disclude anything that he did in the early British Gameau period, because obviously you have a lot in there, but you also have strangulation in the form of Dial M for Murder, which we discussed last episode. So he uses this a lot, and I think it's actually imagery wise, it makes Charlie all the more menacing. I would feel like if he's kind of like a precursor to Norman Bates to a certain respect with his past, but if he were to hold a knife like Norman, I don't feel like it would hold the same menace as it does here when he's, like holding hands in this film is a form of terror. Like, so when he, we'll jump a little bit ahead in the plot. So he comes to the house, gets settled in. Charlie is, poking and prodding him for questions. He's kind of holding back a little bit, but he's still engaging with the family, and, it's good to see you all. And he's reading the evening paper after dinner has settled, and after he's talked with Charlie and given her his gift to her, which is a ring that has an inscription on it already. This might be a clue, guys. It'll come back later. But he reads the paper while everybody else takes care of the chores, and he notices that there's a story about the Merry Widow murderer in the paper, but he doesn't want anybody to know, so he creates a paper house out of the newspaper in order to cover up the evidence. But Charlie pretty much suspects something's up, so she's wondering, well, did they write about my uncle coming back to town? Like,
yeah, I do. Yeah, she definitely did notice that part of it was gone and that he was behaving strangely.
I get it. My uncle's a celebrity.
Like, right. Well, and that's the thing. Like, everyone seems to kind of not be aware of what Uncle Charlie does for a living.
Yep.
Other than that, their perception is that he's very successful. So maybe it is something that he's just like, oh, I don't want you to know that I, am close to some big business deal or something, something that would make a national news kind of setting. Because again, at this point, like, we know he's up to something, but we don't know the severity of what he's up to.
Right. So as
a viewer.
So for all we know, Teresa writes, looking at Uncle Charlie going like, oh my God, my uncle is that opera critic from the Tribune. Oh my God, he got fired. I know that's why he doesn't want anybody to know that he got fired from Citizen Kane's paper. Oh, Cat, no, we're not talking about that movie. We're talking about this one here, Teresa. Get it right. I'm not going to not bring up Citizen Kane more than once in this because it's Joseph Cotten, guys. He's in another Hitchcock movie, but let's face it, we know what Joseph Cotton's most known for.
Well, and I'll tell you how curious I was. I was watching this when I was watching the movie. He's looking at the paper, and I was looking at the back side of the paper that you can see as the viewer, and I didn't see anything that jumped out at me. So I looked away for a second. And then when I looked back, he had it, and he was tearing the section out.
Yep.
And I was like, shit, what did I miss? So I had to roll it back in my janky PlayStation Blu-ray controls, which make no sense whatsoever. I had to roll it back somehow and rewatch to make sure I didn't miss it because I wanted to know what he was hiding, And then I found out, damn it, they don't show anything yet. It's still a mystery what's going on here.
Well, there's two shots there's one shot where he shows him putting a little section of the paper into his pocket, and then they show him folding up and putting the rest in there. But she goes and interrogates him I know why you wanted to get rid of Father's paper. It's because you were fired from that other paper, right? No. But she's like, no, they wrote about you. And she's just like, oh, really? He's like, oh, really? You sure you know? And she pulls out the paper from his jacket pocket, and he goes up and just grabs her arms. And just, it's again, as we were just discussing, hand contact in this movie is a form of violence, is a form of emotion in that respect, and
definitely.
But then he pulls back, and they reconcile, and she's just happy to see him, and
that's the first time too when he grabs her arm with that paper. That's the first time that you get the sense that he might be a violent person,
right? Yeah, absolutely.
Right, because up until this point, you don't. All it could be is a bunch of money was stolen from a bank in New Jersey or whatever, and that's where he came from. Again, it could have been anything at this point that he could have been accused of, but that's kind of your hint that maybe he's not the nice, friendly uncle, positive role model figure that you think he is.
Yeah. But he's but he kind of and he shadows it a lot with his devotion to his sister and to the family history. And there's a discussion in the next scene about Charlie's never been photographed, and they look at a picture of young Charlie, and Emma goes into the story of how Charlie had basically suffered brain damage at a young age in an accident, and it's shot in this beautiful one shot. Every actor's in the frame. Joseph Cotten in the foreground, reacting to Emma telling this story over and over again. Mm-hmm. We are seeing that this is something that it seems like he's just it's almost like he knows that this is the cause of why he does what he does, or this is the moment when he realized that the world is a foul sty, as we'll get to in a minute.
Right. And it's very funny as it speaks to at that time in our past, we didn't understand killers and motivations and things, and that having a TBI as a child is probably not likely to lead you to being a murderous adult, but it is kind of an interesting way to kind of explain what went wrong with him.
Yeah, it's a movie explanation. I don't know. It doesn't hold up water in the strictest sense, but you can allude it to stuff today. I mean, it's
for sure. I just think it's culturally interesting to look at that and see oh gosh, we've come a long way.
Yeah, and this
is from those days.
Yeah, and this is the midpoint between something like The Lodger and something even I would say as early as Rope, where we're starting to dissect the functionality of these killers, and in specifically with Charlie's case, I said he's a precursor to Norman Bates only in the sense that the familial attachment combined with the murderous rage is you can parallel it. I think that unlike Norman, obviously, Charlie is designated more in the category of he does this for a righteous cause, and he's fully aware of it. Whereas Norman it has a whole different set of problems, you know?
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
So we're
yeah.
seeing the rise of this. And amongst all the things, like, so nobody knows what Charlie is up to other than Charlie, and possibly two men who are coming down to do the census or the national poll.
Right.
Which, by the way, another thing that holds up, we still don't want those people in our fucking house.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's like, why would you ever invite them over?
No, I can't do a Joseph Cotton, but just like, look, you tell them that I'll vote however I damn well want to vote. But so Charlie doesn't want to be interviewed by these men. They're going to come around, take pictures of the house, and take pictures of the typical American family. And Emma says a telling line, which is, "I told her we're not a typical American family." And you, as the audience, are like, "Oh, but you are," and that's what makes this tragic.
Right.
Yeah, you see, I put that line in there so that they know that. That shit's gonna get fucked up. Look. He puts it. He's gonna put it out of his mind. They're gonna come at 4. Charlie takes Uncle Charlie to the bank where Father Newton works. He makes a callous joke about embezzlement, and there was a joke. There's a bit of timidity out of Henry Travers here, going like, "We don't make bank jokes here at the bank, Charlie." Like, I could get fired, you asshole. Like,
right. But I should note too with the father character, because before this we're introduced to the friend and their conversations about murder, right?
Yes.
Am I screwing up the timeline?
Yeah, we'll pop back a little bit. This is kind of like a sideline that ends up being a choir of sorts throughout the movie, but Herbie Hawkins is a crime fiction buff along with Joe Newton, and throughout the film they are talking about the perfect way to kill each other.
Yeah, it has nothing. I mean, I shouldn't say nothing. It alludes to the plot in that they kind of let you know, hey, this is a murder story.
Yeah,
right. Because when you first hear them talking, you still don't know what Uncle Charlie might have done. You still don't see him as someone who's potentially violent. So it seems just like a throwaway, silly conversation.
Yeah.
That continues throughout, but it is really their interactions are very humorous and enjoyable to watch, and just their speculations on the perfect way to kill each other is pretty entertaining.
They're lovely to watch. I'll tell you, they are fantastic to watch because one, I'm glad that Joseph Newton's not a board character. Obviously, I said that up front, but also the beauty of it is that they're talking about crime fiction and the best ways to kill somebody or who's the better detective, like virtually unaware that there's an actual crime going on in their midst. And the only time they mention the actual crime that's going on, this line comes later, and I love it. It's just like, I was not really into that case, and I'm like, what are you talking about?
Right?
All the things you have been describing on how you would put each other in the ground, from mushrooms to a small amount of poison in tea, or to the holding the legs in the bathtub. Like, this is like, how can you not be interested in the Merry Widow Murderer? Like,
right? Yeah.
You know what they sound like, Aaron? And I'm going to say this as a loving devotion. They sound like nerds, and they sound like what Ryan, Brad, James, and I do every week on this fucking show. Is talk about like, no. If Iron Man could jump out the window, like.
Then clearly War Machine should be able to do the same.
Look. There's no reason that Captain America wouldn't be able to snap your neck, Joe. That's all I'm saying.
It's funny you bring that up because we rewatched Captain America and the first Avengers movie last night.
Oh, that movie's fucking great. What if I had directed that? That would have been great.
God, I can't even imagine. Oh. It's funny, too, because it put into sharp contrast the simplicity. Simplicity is the wrong word. I guess I would say how contained stories from Hitchcock's era are compared to modern cinema.
Well,
right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's the fact that, like, when you watch a Hitchcock film and there's lines of dialogue, there's always these lines that just because people, and I don't know if people actually talked this way back then or if it was strictly for film or what, but everyone talks pretty quickly, and there's a lot of these little lines that you feel like are throwaway lines that end up being really important later.
It's
so
yeah.
As a viewer for like modern films, we hear a line and we're like, oh, that's going to come back later.
Yeah.
Like most people catch it now, and I don't know if it's because we're just used to that trick in movies or if they just did it better back then. But there's something about that, like the simplicity of the plots. Again, I keep saying simplicity, but that's a bad way to put it because it's not necessarily simple. It's just, it's very much contained. Like, you know who the major players are, and there's no, like, you know, major shifts in anything.
Right.
And it's kind of nice. It's kind of refreshing to just see a very contained, succinct story compared to some of these, like, really big...
Yeah.
overly complex storytelling elements.
Well, what's interesting is that Hitchcock is a proponent of that big and fantabulous, but when he goes intimate, that's when I feel that's when he's usually at his best. I know there's a big fondness, obviously, for things like North by Northwest, and even Vertigo has a lot of scale to it, or, you know, Topaz has a lot of scale, but there's also problems with Topaz. But he likes doing these bigger pieces. Like Foreign Correspondent is a great example. Very expansive, a lot of big set pieces, huge action going on. But whenever he's getting intimate, even in those bigger films, those are the moments I tend to remember the best personally. And I think this film is obviously full of them because, like, the biggest set piece we have is the train at the end.
Right.
And it's not even that big of a set piece. I think you could also say the bar where they have the confrontation. But it's I think also with the dialogue, the patter of that era, I would have to imagine a part of it is also, hey, talking pictures are around. We can have people talk. Let's jazz it up. But it's also like that was the speaking pattern and delivery of the era. I think it's more exaggerated in your His Girl Fridays and stuff like that, where the script is fucking 160 pages, but it's fitting into a 90-minute movie. I think they talk pretty modulated in most of Hitchcock's films. I never feel like they're going too pitter-pattery.
Right.
Because not every film does do that, but...
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's so much of it is, I guess, so much more formal than how we speak now.
Yeah.
That I think that's the other reason it, you know, it's I guess more well hidden within that dialogue when there's a little nod to something that's going to happen later.
Yeah, you're more in the moment of what's happening that moment and not thinking about what may happen down the line.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So they go to the bank. Charlie puts in the money that we as the audience are suspecting is clearly, you know, amongst the other things he gained from strangling those women. And they go back to the house, and the two poll takers have arrived, except they're not obviously the poll takers. They are none other than Detective Jack Graham and Detective Fred Saunders, also known as Detective Bland and Detective Bland. I'm mean. Jack Graham is the most personable stick of wood I've ever seen in a Hitchcock movie. and I'm a guy who will defend John Gavin to the end of the earth because I love Psycho almost unconditionally to that point, and he's named after one of the greatest doctor characters in film history that would happen later on. Anyway, Jack Graham is likable and personable. And Fred Saunders does add his own, like, little character ticks in the moments that we see them. And obviously, Graham is more of a romantic interest for Charlie. Fred Saunders is your workaday cop or detective. But his little tick is he really doesn't like putting up with Emma. And her refusal to crack an egg when he's commanding it for the pictures of her at home in the house baking. So they're going around asking the poll questions, and really they're trying to get a photograph of Uncle Charlie. Charlie goes to many lengths to avoid having his photo taken. He makes a slip up by coming back into the house through the back door, and they get a picture of him. He says, "I'm going to have to ask for that film back." They give him the film back, or do they? I
have to say that was a, I think, like, and I don't know what it is for me, but when they did, I was like, oh, he switched that film. Yeah. Like, it wasn't even a question.
You kind of call it from the get-go, but like there's a part of you that's just like, well, like how? But like you know what? It goes back to the movie logic thing where I'm just like, you know what? Things just happen.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, I think for me, the reason I was like, oh yeah, I know what he did there. A little confession here that maybe a lot of people don't know about me. I used to do magic in like middle school, high school.
What?
And yeah, and so that move he did, I'm like, oh yeah, no, that's a switch you use like in magic to like load something or change something out.
Oh,
so,
dude, I knew there was a reason I brought you on for this movie. I did not know you were a magician.
So it was kind of funny seeing that. I'm like, oh yeah, I know that move. Like, you know.
Yes. That Orson fella thought he was a magician. Look what I fucking did. That is so cool. I have to watch that frame by frame now. Like, oh my god, that's...
Well, and what's funny is it's not even like it's not really like a specific move. It's just the motion he did. I was like, oh, if I were doing a magic trick, that's what I would do to distract you from what I was actually doing.
And that goes...
You know, so it just like something about it, like hit that chord in my brain where I was like, oh, I bet he switched that out there.
And it goes back to Hitch's detail that we've talked about as early on as episode 2, where he's going to throw in those little dabs of detail in there. Man, that I did not even think that. That is, I've seen this movie plenty of times. I've never thought of that. That is, dude, thank you for lending your expertise on this one. I'm blown away right now. I don't think show's over. Like, now we need to do a magic podcast.
I've officially revealed how gigantic of a nerd I am. So I think we've covered it all now.
You also broke the magician's oath to not reveal those secrets. So you, much like Job in Arrested Development, are no longer welcome to that magic castle.
I did not reveal how it was done.
Oh.
I just said I recognized the move.
But you won't reveal that move under penalty of magic death.
Let me put on a mask and get a network TV show first, and then we'll talk.
I mean, if anything, Penn and Teller will just take this podcast and be like, "Here's how they did it."
Right? Yeah.
Because everything is skeptical. Those people are funny. Anyway.
Yeah.
So they get the photo. Jack Graham says, "That's all we need, ma'am. Except I would like to take your daughter out if you'll let me." And you know, it's why I say, like, you know, Jack Graham's not just some typical masculine cipher. He's gonna be more involved in this movie, whether we like it or not.
Right. I do enjoy that they introduce him as that. You know, he's interested in young Charlie, but that ultimately does not assist in anything in a meaningful way with the conflict.
No. He just needs to look pretty. Can he just look pretty?
But again, the going back to the typical Hollywood damsel in distress, guy has to come in and save her situation. It's nice that they didn't do that, even though they kind of set it up like that could have happened.
Right. Exactly. This could have been a situation where you have your typical male hero come in and save the day, but thankfully, we've talked about how Hitchcock teeter-totters around a little bit when it comes to, well, are his women characters strong or are they not? There's constant debate about that. One thing you can say is that he will make women the focal point or the lead character of the movie more often than not. And this is certainly the case because it's actually a dual lead, because obviously Charlie and Uncle Charlie and their connection make them both like dual protagonists, I guess, which goes against Marshall's theory, but I'm gonna just use it for the sake of this argument here.
Right.
But so they have a night on the town, Teresa Wright looking gorgeous and fantastic, and Jack looking like Jack, and I don't know who I am to be judging people's looks, but whatever. So they go around the town, and it's through a reveal. It's an interesting edit where they're having this wonderful time, and then it suddenly sticks on Loretta Young's face, backs out, and says, "What are you saying about my uncle?"
Right.
And it's not like an awkward edit. Like, it's not like, oh, this doesn't belong. It's just more like, man, like, that's an interesting way to transition their conversation where they're clearly having fun at that local diner to this.
Right.
And then so
it does feel like kind of rushed. Like why is suddenly this a thing now?
Yeah. And so as a result, he reveals what they are suspecting Charlie of, but they also make it clear that there's another man in the East who is also suspected of the same crimes and that they're on pursuit of him as well. So we've already planted the bomb now we're planting this bomb under the table, which is Charlie actively suspects her uncle
of committing a crime, but she didn't want the details.
Yeah,
so we still don't know what he may have done.
Yeah, because
correct. I feel like that's what happened, but I may be misremembering.
Yeah, well, no, he's not. He doesn't get extremely specific with it. She has to puzzle it together by reclaiming that newspaper article and heading to the library late at night, pounding on the door, going like, "Let me in," and. I'm sorry, Teresa Wright. You're beautiful. You're gorgeous, but I still wouldn't let you into the library after hours because people need to go home.
Yeah, it's 9 o'clock. It's time for. That's like the customer that walks in a minute before closing.
Yeah.
To do shopping. It's like, no, you're not. You don't have time.
Yeah,
you missed your window.
Yeah, this goes for Teresa Wright. This also goes for Jake Gyllenhaal in Zodiac when he's pounding on police doors late at night going like, I found another clue that could lead to another clue maybe. Watch Zodiac, guys. It's wonderful.
It's a great flick.
Yeah, but she is granted access to this library and she goes through the past newspapers and in a move that Peter Bogdanovich describes has a sudden breath of air being taken out of you. We see the full clipping of the Merry Widow murderer and the full description. We find out that the latest victim would have been a Mrs. B, I believe it was a music instructor or a music connoisseur, and she looks at the ring that she was given to her by Uncle Charlie, and the inscription that she was noticing is an inscription that would match this specific victim. So now the bomb under the table is Charlie knows. So when is Uncle Charlie going to find out that Charlie knows, and what's going to happen from there?
And this is another, I shouldn't say another, this is one of the parallels that I noticed yesterday when rewatching Strangers on a Train, is this small item that ties someone to a crime that becomes kind of a key part of the story.
Yeah.
Because in Strangers on a Train you have the lighter,
yeah,
with the names on it, and in this you have the ring, and in both cases the object would implicate someone in a crime, but in one case it implicates a guilty party, and the other it implicates an innocent party.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting thing that he used some kind of small, seemingly innocuous object to be the crux of guilt or innocence in the flick.
Yeah, and it's. I think that it's interesting how this film and Strangers on a Train both mirror each other and then also diametrically oppose each other within those elements, because you can also tie in Emma to Bruno's mom in Strangers on a Train in that certain respect, in terms of their devotion to their significant subject at hand.
Right.
And you're right, that utilization of a small prop to implicate somebody or relieve them of any guilt is definitely present within that. The ring is the MacGuffin, and so is the newspaper. Like, they don't really matter to those plots, but they are essential to the characters understanding what's going on.
Exactly. Yeah.
So they she goes back home. She's feeling on edge. Anne, the smartest one in the room, wants to switch seats away from Uncle Charlie. And she said, like, oh, I talked to Roger. He doesn't mind. And I'm like, of course not. Little young Norman Bates has to learn something from his uncle, right?
Right.
He looks eerily like he could be a young Tony Perkins in that movie. It is really bizarre. It's all connected in that hashtag thing. Yeah, the Twitters. So that they sit down to have dinner, and within that, Herbie comes back to discuss another one of his famous perfect murders. Uncle Charlie decides that he's just going to open up a little bit of himself to the family dinner.
Right. Yeah, that's such a... Man, like, if you're a murderer on the run, that is not the monologue you give at the dinner table.
The quotes are, he describes, he's talking about these widows who, he's basically talking about men work and slave for women to then just live off of that money. They eat their money, they drink their money, they bet it on bridge games. And I'm like, you're getting very specific. And and now, granted, this is also a stereotypical trope of the widow character in any given age during this period of the 30s, 40s, and 50s. But he refers to them as fat, wheezing animals. What happens to animals when they get too fat and too old? And I'm like, Jesus Christ.
Right.
This is in the 1940s, guys. I don't want to hear any more that black and white movies are boring. If I hear that out of another person, I'm going to shove this movie right in front of them and say, watch. The only difference between this and what David Fincher does is that David Fincher will actively put blood and splatter it all over the walls if necessary. So like, obviously Charlie has his issues with women, and specifically elderly women. Ben and young Charlie freaks out at this. She runs out. And Uncle Charlie follows her and takes her to a bar where it would seem one of her younger friends who's gone astray has gone to work now.
Which is such...
It's so depressing.
Everything with that character is so strange. She's her performance and what she says. And
she's like bored Betty Davis is how...
Yeah.
Like, she is incredibly disengaged. Like, wow, that's a really cool ring. I love that ring.
She's like the precursor to... oh, God, what's her name? Aubrey Plaza? Like, that archetype.
When I was thinking of her, the only thing I could think of in this viewing was the secretary to Timothy Dalton in Hot Fuzz, who's just sitting at the desk filing her nails. Like, manager to Mr. Skinner to the manager's office, Mr. Skinner. So he runs down a more elaborate version of his speech at the dinner table to Charlie, basically implying, like, he's basically admitting to the crime, while also trying to get her on his side.
Right, basically saying, like, you've been stuck in small town America and you don't know what the real world is like, and it's a pretty awful place, and it's what I've done is not that bad. It's essentially
it's the most fucked up version of trying to get someone woke I've ever seen. No, that was not a term yet. No, everybody was woke back in the 40s. Like, no, they weren't, Hitch. They go back to the house, and Uncle Charlie basically agrees to leave in a couple of days, so long as she doesn't reveal what's going on. And it turns from there into the now the suspense lies in, will Charlie leave? Will Charlie be found out, for that matter? We cut back to a day later, and the detectives have revealed that they did in fact get the film thanks to Aaron's magic and thanks to your fucking magic tricks. And they're gonna compare that photo to witnesses along with photos of the other person they're tracking down in the East. But it's also revealed that within this, that the man in the East was gunned down in the midst of a pursuit. And
honestly, this is the one kind of plot hole problematic issue I have, is that because they're chasing down, who's actually not gunned down, he is running away and runs into an airplane propeller.
Yes,
which makes kind of hilarious.
Which makes you wonder, was he in pursuit by a archaeologist who was searching for some kind of religious relic?
It's possible.
Oh yeah, dude. Oh, it's You see how smart I am.
But I find this problematic because they had one of their suspects, they chased him, he died, and they just assume, well, he did it, we're done now. Even though they have a photo of someone that, to me, I would say, let's go ahead and ask the eyewitness if this was the person, so we know the right person is gone.
Okay, so my assumption is that they're assuming because that man ran and Charlie didn't, that they're going to hold on to that lead more.
That's what I think too. I mean, I do believe that, why would you run if you hadn't done anything wrong?
Right.
But at the same time, check all your, cross all your T's, dot all your I's.
Yeah.
Like, make sure you got it all.
What Saunders really should have done was just bring on Anne as their third partner in the investigation, because she could have helped them solve it instantly, just like that.
Oh, so much faster.
Oh, God.
No. It would have been like a 20-minute movie.
Oh, dude. It would have been the best Nancy Drew pilot we've ever seen. I can come up with murders, I can come up with thrilling action, and I can come up with girl mystery novels. Look at what I can do. I can do everything. So I love Hitch. He's so happy in this film because he's just having fun with this. The lead is thrown off. Charlie feels like, oh, I've got it covered. I can stay here now in Hicksburg. But there's this wonderful shot where he's like, oh, well, I'm relieved. I'm going up the stairs and get ready for dinner. Goes up those stairs. There's a pause, a long ass pause before he turns around and sees that Charlie's still suspecting him.
Right.
Which
is a great shot. Like she's in the doorway. You've got the shadow casting in.
And she's sort of obscured a little bit too, like just from the focus. But it's not a technical glitch. It just looks amazing. But because she already got a confession essentially out of him in the bar, he's not off the hook.
Right. And I do think to some extent she's willing to leave it alone so long as he leaves.
Yeah, exactly.
But then when he decides to stay, that's when she's like, I can't just leave this alone.
No, exactly. There's no going back from this. So Charlie's now got to figure out how to eliminate his niece from this situation. Jack comes by to say goodbye, and he and young Charlie have a flirtatious engagement in the garage.
Where he confesses his love for her, even though they went on one date.
Yeah, which...
Oh, the 40s.
Yeah, pro tip based on experience, don't do that.
Yeah, it doesn't go over well.
No, it doesn't.
Not in 2020.
You get your heart broken, and no, Teresa Wright won't go out with you. I'm sorry. It's just... Because she even says, like, I don't know, but you're a good friend.
He does, yeah. He gets friend-zoned. It's pretty great.
But no, she gives him a slimmer of hope, I guess, because she's like, well, I do hope you come back. I do hope, like...
Right.
She just... You know what?
He just came on a little strong, even for the 40s.
You know what? Yeah, she's correct. Like, because, look, you are clearly a guy I would want to go out with. However, I've got a murderous uncle in the house. So that first, you second. Like,
you come later.
Yeah, you male cipher, step to the side for a second while I deal with Orson Welles' acting friend there. Stop mentioning him. They get trapped in the garage too, and it sets up that later scene in the garage. So we begin a small series of Uncle Charlie trying to kill young Charlie, first by affecting the steps from the back entrance to the house. Oh no, you could have tripped and broke your neck, and she puzzles it together by putting the broken piece of wood to the rest of the stairs, which, like
he sees her doing, which is, and they don't even it's not even a secret. She comes upstairs and he's standing up there watching her, and they have a conversation.
Yeah,
but
isn't it amazing that she does more detective work than Batman ever does in any movie we see?
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, it's like Teresa Wright should have been Batman, guys. I'm sorry, not to piss off anybody, but or maybe I am. So they have that beautifully dark lit scene. Where
that's another one of those where I'm just like, this is why I love noir stuff, man. Like, that lighting is so good.
And he starts doing that gaslighting of, like, no one's gonna believe you, that manipulation thing. And she's just like, I don't want you to touch my mother. I don't want you near my mother. and he's like, well, I gotta figure out a different way to get rid of her. So he starts. He leaves the car on without the key in there, with it filling up with gas, knowing that if young Charlie goes in there, she'll be trapped and get monoxide poisoning. But thankfully, as this happens, when they're all getting ready to go to a lecture where Uncle Charlie's going to speak, young Charlie goes out there to get the car, and she's overwhelmed with smoke. But luckily, Herbie Hawkins happened to be passing by.
Yeah,
he's the coolest character ever.
I'll say it's funny because he is a very. It's very convenient, but at the same time, they've also established that he kind of comes by around dinner every night.
Yeah.
And they're heading out to an event tonight, probably around the time they would normally be having dinner. So it makes sense that he would come by, but so I can appreciate that, but it is still very convenient that he just happens by. I do think it's funny that he runs inside instead of trying harder to open the shed himself.
Yeah, well, clearly Herbie, as badass as he is probably not going to be able to open that door.
Fair enough.
No offense to aged up Hugh Cronin. By the way, they did have to age him up makeup wise because he was not the age that Herbie was supposed to be. Young Charlie escapes. Escapes via help from everybody because suddenly Charlie's caught from his scheme, so he's got to cover it up by saving young Charlie. He's trying to revive her, and she says, "Go away." It's just wonderful acting on Teresa Wright's part.
Right.
And so they go to the lecture and whatnot, and while and leaving Teresa Wright alone in the home, while they're off at the lecture, she locates the ring, which she had previously taken off and given back to Charlie at the bar. So she grabs it from him again. They come back to the house. Charlie's getting ready to make a toast. And as young Charlie comes down the stairs, he's waiting for her to make this toast, and he sees that the ring is on her hand. And so he knows that she's not going to stop until he's caught or that he goes away. So he makes the sudden announcement, "I'm leaving." Bye.
Yep.
And
leaving tomorrow morning.
And it breaks Emma's heart, obviously.
Right. And it's interesting, too, like in movies of that era, I feel like anymore you would see a protagonist not showing their hand like that, hiding the stuff, going to the police with it later, that sort of thing.
Right.
So it is a very interesting, again, her just trying to get him to go.
Yeah.
Because she thinks that's the only solution available.
Yeah.
It's like,
because we because we should mention she and Uncle Charlie are both aware that if Emma were to find out what was going on, it would absolutely shatter her world.
Right.
And
despite his disdain for women, or what seems like disdain for women overall, he seems to genuinely care about his sister at least.
Yeah, he's a character that I think his fondness, and again that motif of the Merry Widow dance does come into play within this regard. Is there's a general yearning from him for the days prior to his accident. And an era like the simpler time, which is interesting because Joseph Cotton, the year before in The Magnificent Ambersons, plays a character who is essentially on the side of moving forward in time and not reflecting back, because it's very much about that Gilded Age and also the emergence of the automobile. And how an old money family is ruined by it. And the movie would be great, except the ending sucks because it wasn't by Orson Welles. So, yeah, that's a whole other story we'll get into in another series that's down the line. But because I'll have a lot to yell about. But so anyway, he announces he's leaving first thing tomorrow at the train station. The whole family wants to get a tour of the train before Uncle Charlie departs. He corners young Charlie and basically says, I want you to forget about me. I want you to forget that I was ever here. But, obviously, as the train is starting to move and the rest of the family has left the train, she's not going anywhere. And it's terrifying.
Yeah, it's a really it's a really tense scene. It calls back to that, the holding hands or grabbing someone is seen as like a very violent act because, of course, he grabs her wrists very forcibly initially to have the conversation with her to keep her on the train until it's moving.
And there's always his hands are always visible when there's about to be something on his end that's menacing. And so and they're lit in a very harsh shadow. And so he grabs a hold of her. He's trying to throw her off the train as soon as it gets fast enough, but she's able to maneuver and hold on to the train, and Uncle Charlie makes the fatal mistake and falls out of the train and gets hit by an oncoming train. And as he dies, the Merry Widow Waltz ever plays on in a very haunting way. In a way, I wish that the movie would end on this moment alone.
I feel like that's really all it needed.
Yeah. But obviously, we need the tie-up.
Right. And it's funny because I feel like this era of cinema was more common to just end it there. Right, and roll credits. So this might be that kind of transitional moment where they realized, we need to tie this up a little bit, and have like a more refined ending. Because we talked about it a little bit in when we did The Man Who Knew Too Much and the remake.
Yeah. And
how very much in one it just kind of ends, and the other movie there's that little kind of humorous throwaway ending. But it's almost like you need that wrap-up moment. And I feel like I prefer that, just it ends. Like, the action is over, we're done,
Yeah.
So I agree. Like, I feel like that moment should have been the end of it. But at the same time, the scene after with the funeral for Uncle Charlie, if nothing else, serves as a way for you, as the viewer, to know that the perception of her brother has not been tainted by this,
or of her uncle, yeah,
but we know. For young Charlie's mother, her perception of her brother hasn't changed. Young Charlie knows he's still a murderer. It's alluded to the fact that the detective knows that that's who they were really after. But they're going to leave it at that. They're not going to pursue it further or drag him through the mud because he's gone now too.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just like it's their secret now, and it does end like the conversation they have is well written. It's just that obviously there's imagery you'd rather end it on. So, but that ends Shadow of a Doubt. Hitchcock considered this his favorite film. Years later, with an interview in Telescope, Fletcher Markle had made the statement, most critics have considered Shadow of a Doubt, which you made in 1943, as your finest film, and Hitchcock immediately replies, "Me too," and then and in the question with the follow-up question, is that your opinion of it, and Hitchcock would say, "Oh, no question." So he clearly was a huge fan of this film. It got rave reviews all across the board. Bosley Crowther, the guy who I have proclaimed my nemesis, loved this film. He's stating that Hitchcock could raise more goose pimples to the square inch of a customer's flesh than any other director in Hollywood. Obviously, he would not feel this way so much down the line in the 50s, but regardless,
right.
This is one of those Hitchcock films that has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes to this day. So not every Hitchcock film has that perfect rating. This one does. Like, everybody can agree this one is fantastic. It was adapted for radio more than once. Amongst other ones, you have the Lux Radio Theater version in 1944 with Teresa Wright as her original role, and William Powell as Uncle Charlie. And William Powell was the original choice for Uncle Charlie, but he could not get out. He could not be loaned out by MGM, so they got Joseph Cotten instead. Which I feel like, if Powell did it, you would have talked Oscar for him, because that would have been such a huge departure. And there's also discussions that Cary Grant was considered for Uncle Charlie. I find those to be. It seems like that wouldn't necessarily be the case. If you did that, you'd be really fucking around with the Cary Grant mythology, and I don't know how willing people would have been to do that at the time.
Right.
So
yeah, it does seem, when I heard that, I was like, well, I mean, it to some extent makes sense because he was, prominent at the time, but it also feels like a departure from what you expect of a Cary Grant character in a film.
Listen, darling, do you know that the world is a foul sty?
Right? Yeah, like it doesn't. I don't buy that from him.
Obviously Ryan loves Cary Grant, but I think he and I would both agree. Like, I would have to assume he and I would both agree. Like, it'd be really hard to stretch this. Like, this is paper that's not going to form very. Or this is silly putty that sat out too long and got hard.
Right.
It's not going to change too much.
Yeah.
So. Couple of years go by, Hitchcock carries on through the 40s and, forms Transatlantic Pictures that kind of stumbles around. And it lands him, for our purposes on this episode, in the year 1951. And we get his follow-up in the noir genre with Strangers on a Train, based on the novel by Patricia Highsmith. Hitchcock saw the novel and got the rights for it. And shot in the autumn of 1950 and released by Warner Brothers in 1951. This is still a transatlantic picture because Hitchcock still had the company intact at the time, and Warner Brothers had basically, at this point, bought out Transatlantic Pictures as the exclusive holders to distribute those particular films. So, but at this point, it seems like Bernstein's gone from the picture, and it's just Hitchcock. So, 1951, directed by our guy, screenplay by Raymond Chandler, Whitfield Cook, and Senzi Ormond, based on the novel, starring Farley Granger, Ruth Roman, Robert Walker, Patricia Hitchcock, Leo G. Carroll, and Laura Elliott. Quite a cast of people. And the production on this film, he got the rights to the novel for only $7,500 since it was her first novel, and Hitchcock kept his name out of the negotiations to keep the price low.
Which we've also discussed on this podcast.
Yep, and we had talked about it, and Highsmith was quite annoyed, very pissed off about that.
I can imagine. I would have been.
Yeah, but the treatment got an initial forming and construction. The film got an initial forming and construction and an outline by Whitfield Cook, who was really the one who weaves the homoerotic subtext that we see throughout this movie. Whitfield Cook, it's interesting. He's a writer who worked on such things as Stage Fright for Hitchcock and wrote a lot for TV. In the movie Hitchcock, with Anthony Hopkins, Whitfield Cook is played off as sort of a guy that Alma Revel might be having an affair with, or at least like they're playing it to that angle, but obviously Whitfield's more interested in Hitch reading his treatment for another movie. That's how it's played in that particular biopic. But this is one of two films that he helped with, and they were family friends. And it's also said that he kind of softened Bruno from an alcoholic into more of a, flippant rich boy. And then Chandler was brought in to do this film, and he and Hitch did not get along. The reason Chandler is being brought in, amongst other things, he's a prolific writer of the detective and the noir genre, having gotten a nomination for Double Indemnity. And so Chandler thought the story was silly, but he took it anyway, and the two just clashed. They would never work together again. Obviously, Chandler completed a first draft, did a second, and then without hearing a single word back from Hitchcock, he took the silence as his exit to the project. He tried to get Ben Hecht to come in and touch it up, but Ben was unavailable. Hecht suggested Senzi Ormond to finish up the screenplay, and the result of what we get is pretty dark, grimy, all set along a shiny veneer, really. Like, this movie, the ugliest it gets in terms of a visual standpoint is when we're at the fair.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, everything else is very... well, I don't know, it's again, what impressed me with this film as well as the last one is the lighting. Like,
Yeah.
It's so well lit, so masterfully lit. Just little things like when they're riding on the train and seeing like, the shadow from like a telephone line going by or something.
Yeah.
Those kind of details I think we lose in a lot of all the other noise of modern film, but it's little things like that that really make the scenes in that movie work.
Yep. And it should be noted that, in addition, Alma Revel once again contributing to this screenplay as well. Basically, Armand, producer Barbara Kean, and Alma all sat down and basically hunkered together to punch out this story with less than 3 weeks until location shooting was going to happen. And even as they were filming on location in Washington, D.C., and filming in near Penn Station, Connecticut, and Washington, D.C., they are punching out the script. When they get back onto set, they were basically rewriting and finalizing the film on set. So kind of like Casablanca, the film didn't have an ending up till the last minute. So they were constantly working on this. This is also the first film that Robert Burks shoots for Hitch. And now this is Burks working in black and white, so we've known him primarily for the color films that he shot with Hitch, but clearly Robert Burks was a cameraman to be reckoned with. He could do it.
Obviously.
He's the Deakins of his era, man. Look at this guy.
Yeah.
We'll talk a lot. I mean, Farley Granger had obviously worked with Hitch prior on Rope, and Ruth Roman and Laura Elliott are kind of new to this whole Hitch affair.
Wait, hold up. Speaking of Rope, Joseph Valentine, the cinematographer for the last movie we talked about, was on Rope as well. And I just realized it's kind of a travesty we didn't mention him in our conversation about...
Oh, yeah, we should touch on him for a second. I mean, like, the imagery that Valentine gets out of Shadow of a Doubt is... I think it sets a template for, I wouldn't say horror films, but I think a lot of thrillers. Thrillers we're going to get into the 80s and 90s. Like, there's a bit of a soft focus on this film.
Yeah, I mean, it's the just understanding, like, little things with the framing and the movement of the camera, and, understanding, again, I'm sure part of it, too, is with whoever's doing the lighting in that. But, yeah, really just so masterfully done as far as having control of those shadows and those highlights, and it's shot so well. I mean, and again, same thing with Strangers on a Train. I think the noir thing is difficult to nail, and I think both do it in the terms of how they, how they're shot and lit, and it's pretty impressive.
No, it's definitely it's an innovation of what noir is eventually going to become. But this is explicitly not. We label it as a noir, but like at the time they're looking just to make a suspenseful picture. There's no label on it from the film theory realm. So there's nothing holding it back in terms of
terms what's expected.
Yeah, it's like, oh, this is what it's supposed to be, Right. Like there's no expectation within that scenario. So Strangers on a Train is very much a sister to Shadow of a Doubt in terms of, or a brother in terms of just capturing that Americana tone amidst a very dark and sinister scenario, and both of these DPs are able to elicit what the darker side of America entails. Like they understand its architecture and how it applies to something like German Expressionism to create these harsh shadows that we end up seeing. I mean, we see it in all of Hitchcock's movies, but like these two have prominent instances of it, the likes of which we don't see prior to beyond much of the silent era that he shot in. So, I mean, like The Man Who Knew Too Much has a lot of that too.
Right.
Not as much, but enough to suggest, like, he was basically innovating a lot of forms of noir before noir became like a heavy genre in post-war America.
Right.
Like I said, we have Farley Granger. Like I said, we've got Robert Walker playing Bruno Anthony. Robert Walker's story is pretty sad. He was married to Jennifer Jones. Jennifer Jones left him for none other than David O. Selznick. If you listen to the Secret History of Hollywood podcast, you get the tragic story of Robert Walker told way better than I will ever be able to relay it. But after this film is over, Robert Walker had a big alcohol problem, and Strangers on a Train is his last movie. He dies shortly before the movie is released. And Robert Walker Jr. is interviewed in the featurettes, and if you want to listen to, experience what it's like to be Robert Walker, like to see Robert Walker making Strangers on a Train, it's through the firsthand experience of his son, hands down. We'll jump right into the plot because we got a lot to tackle here. We open up on a train station.
Imagine that.
Of course we would. Why wouldn't we?
Who knew?
It's in the movie. I told you where it would be. So we see two sets of feet diametrically opposed to each other, approaching the train, getting on the train, and encountering each other. Right off the bat, we're setting up the duality here.
Right. And I think it's interesting, someone pointed this out in an interview I was doing about old-time cinema and Western specifically. They said, the good guys wore white cowboy hats and the bad guys wore black cowboy hats, and you knew who was who, And this is kind of that similar kind of concept, right, where one of them has got black shoes and one of them has the white on their shoes.
Yeah, the white pattern over the black tip. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and that's kind of that same motif, and in a way, it's a little, I don't like how obvious it is, but back then, I don't know that it would have been that obvious. So yeah. So, I mean, I think the imagery, I don't know if everybody's going to pop onto it right away, but it's imagery that's identifiable. It psychologically is going to trigger you into basically assuming who your good guy and your bad guy is. Exactly. Yeah.
But what's interesting is that the white over the black tip would suggest that not even Farley Granger can be trusted. So,
right.
And part of the novel is that, it's kind of a spoiler ahead of time, but in the novel, Guy goes through with the murder. So, so I automatically there's going to be a difference here. But they meet on the train. Shoes tap accidentally. Not like today where it's on purpose and in bathroom stalls. So yeah, I'll get that humor in. Guy is recognized by none other than Bruno Anthony. Bruno is very, very interested in meeting with Guy Haynes here and just really digging into his personal life. He knows everything about Guy Haynes. He is Guy Haynes' superfan right here.
And it's interesting too because the again, it's that kind of suspension of disbelief of what are the odds that these two people would run into each other,
right?
Or is the assumption that he intentionally was kind of trying to engineer this run-in with Guy?
I feel like it's ambiguous intentionally,
right?
Because a thing that should be noted is that Bruno Anthony is kind of like cinema's first real stalker character,
right.
Or at least the most popular form of what we see today in a stalker film. Obviously, he knows way too much about Guy Haynes, but now Guy Haynes is a tennis star, and he is having an affair, and is very disenchanted with his promiscuous wife Miriam, played by Casey Rogers, and we basically know that he's in the spotlight. It's reasonable that Bruno would know about these things. What makes it creepy is that
he's a celebrity, an athlete. People know his face and what he does, and
But what's uncomfortable is that Bruno is just very insistent on knowing more about Guy and also the lengths that Guy would go. So he basically encourages him to share a meal with him in a private car. And Bruno Anthony talks, amongst other things, of the things he's despondent with and frustrated with. And he talks about how he hates his father. He hates his father so much. And it should be noted that, Bruno Anthony comes from a wealthy family. So it's another case of much like the Dial M for Murder episode. It's a case of a rich guy who's very pissed off and just embittered.
Right.
So
and it's interesting too because it leads into a conversation of do you want to hear about my ideas for a perfect murder? Which is again that kind of callback to Shadow of a Doubt and the father and his friend talking about how they would murder each other and get away with it.
Exactly. So we basically get. What if what Herbie and Joe are talking about becomes an entire movie?
Right. Yeah, kind of.
It's not just shuffled off into the background like Charters and Caldecott. Like it is full on in center. And so yes, Bruno suggests that if he were to murder Miriam, Guy's soon-to-be ex-wife, and in return, Guy would kill Bruno's father. Crisscross is the terminology that Robert Walker uses.
Yes.
To such delight. It's a fantastic performance. He is fucking amazing in this movie. And
he really is.
And it's a crime that he wasn't posthumously nominated for an Oscar for this movie. Like, it is just utterly disastrous for the Academy to have that on its laurels, amongst other things. So, Guy's just kind of playing this off. He's just like, no, sure, you're a smart guy, Bruno.
Right, yeah. He's very much like, he's being cordial, but he's trying to get away from this clearly unhinged individual.
Mm-hmm. And Bruno takes it as the go sign.
Yeah. He takes it as I'm getting your wink and your nudge here. I'll go take care of your problem.
Yeah. And Guy, he humors him. He gets off the train. Bruno takes it as the go signal. Guy forgets his lighter with Bruno, and Bruno keeps it. And the lighter is engraved A to G, which is to implicate Anne to Guy. So it sets up the it's our MacGuffin again, but essentially it sets up for an audience that this is Anne's gift to Guy, the woman that he's wanting to be with, which in turn also provides further implication of what's to come. Guy meets with Miriam, his wife, who is now pregnant with somebody else's baby, and is suddenly saying she no longer wants a divorce. And this sets Guy into a rage as they talk in a private booth. And he leaves very angry and flustered at Miriam, calls up Anne to tell her that, she's backing out of it. Now she doesn't want the divorce. And he says the phrase, I just want to strangle her.
Right. And it's also good to note, too, that scene, it's a private booth, but it's surrounded by glass mostly, so a lot of people see their confrontation.
Not only can they see, they can hear it.
Right.
This is not
and it's broken up by another individual, so I think that is important, from a story standpoint, to let people know, people have seen him in a physical confrontation with his ex-wife.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a problem later.
And further bolsters the case of the police against Guy later on.
Exactly.
But so Guy makes the statement, I wish I could just strangle her. And later we see Bruno has arrived in the same town and is stalking Miriam to the amusement park. And this is where we kind of really push into the Americana. Now, unlike Shadow of a Doubt, where you're dealing with a small town as your major set piece that's kind of scattered, so it's not a set piece per se, the amusement park is clearly a set piece.
Right, and it's very much the analog for small town America, because honestly, with the senator's daughter thing with Guy's, love interest and being in DC, essentially, it doesn't have that killer comes to small town, but that kind of, local carnival fair setting where the murder happens is very much small town. So despite the backdrop of the big city, there's that little, where the crime happens is in your backyard still. And
also we should, it should be mentioned within that, in Shadow of a Doubt, the upending of Americana with Joseph Cotton is kind of strewn about the entire movie in smaller ways. In this film, we get a very obvious, but I think very wonderful moment where a kid, as Bruno's walking through the carnival following Miriam, a kid in a cowboy outfit is pretending to shoot him, going bang, 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 bang. And Robert Walker just pops this kid's balloon with his cigarette. So
that is pretty fantastic.
So not only is Bruno insane, he's an asshole.
Right. But in case you missed it, this guy's a dick.
Yeah, exactly. But in case you also missed it, it's to suggest that your cowboy ethics are not going to save you from the wrath that is Bruno Antony. Very much hitting on the idea of the Western mythos, the American hero being befuddled by the machinations of this rich asshole.
Right.
So he stalks her around. Goes through the Tunnel of Love. The Tunnel of Love sequence, very tense. You think that something's going to happen in there, and it doesn't.
Quick question on that, from your perspective.
Yeah.
The first few times I saw it, I thought she was like, I couldn't tell if she was creeped out by him, or if she was like, oh, is this guy interested? Because she's, very promiscuous, as they've set up.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
My take on it is that, as sad as it is to say, she is set up as promiscuous. He does some show-offy things to lower her guard.
Right.
And
like with the strength test with the hammer and the bell thing, and
which Robert Walker's got Jason Voorhees strength, which is pretty cool. Because I can't imagine Robert Walker actually having the strength to hit that thing all the way up to the top. But, also 50s men probably could have been a lot stronger than we are right now with our weak muscles. But,
right.
I think...
Well, they wore those suits with so many layers. It was hard to tell,
That is true. Like Robert Mitchum, you never knew if he was in shape or out of shape, as Family Guy told us. But I think that he's basically trying to lower her guard. It seems like it, because the reactions on her suggest that she's intrigued by this man.
Right.
So much so that... Oh, yeah.
I was just saying, initially, it's... Sometimes I couldn't tell if it was intrigue or if she was concerned about him following her. And I think it's part of it is the modern lens I'm looking at it through. I think that kind of behavior would creep out someone more likely than them be like, ooh, this is interesting.
No,
but
I think it's blending the two, too, as well, because there can be concern on... It's almost as if, though, the intention is trying to mix the two.
Right, yeah, like she knows it's maybe suspect, but also she likes the attention, so...
Yeah, so I think it's a combination of the two, but, if I had to lean on the other one, I think the intention of the filmmaker is to suggest that she's intrigued, so she lets her guard down, so that when she's finally cornered in the dark near the Lover's Island, the lighter... goes up and he says, "Is your name Miriam?" She goes, "Yes," and then Strangletown. And that wonderful shot of the glasses showing the murder.
Yeah, the reflection in the glasses is really
pretty
clever.
Yeah, which is a process shot, and it's fantastic. It's another example of Hitch using two different plates to essentially tell a story. It's a special effect, but not your traditional, what we know today, special effect.
Right.
So Miriam's dead. Guy is sorry,
on a train at the time.
Yeah, he's on,
which is interesting.
Yeah,
because it would be an alibi in theory.
Yeah, except
twist.
Twist. There's a drunken asshole professor who's bragging about his night that won't remember it later on.
Exactly. Yep.
And he gets to the senator's house, and Bruno. Guy arrives home first, and Bruno goes to him to inform him that Miriam is dead, and shows him the glasses, And now he is insisting, now you've got to honor your end of the bargain that we clearly made.
Right. Well, and this goes into the, kind of a similar thing with Shadow of a Doubt, where you now have a character who's aware that a crime has occurred, but they don't know that they feel like they can't go to the police for one reason or another.
Yeah.
In Shadow of a Doubt, it's my uncle, and I want to believe the best of him, and I don't want to believe that they're capable of this. And in this, it's, my current wife, but hopefully soon to be ex-wife, has been murdered, and it's going to look like I did it, so I can't go to anybody.
Yeah, exactly. Now, and the key difference in this is that we're playing upon the ordinary man in extraordinary circumstances, or also the wrong man on the run, which is a constant theme throughout Hitchcock's work. Obviously, The Wrong Man with Henry Fonda is like the most obvious example of that in terms of like not even just a title, but also a concept. Which is a fantastic movie. If we don't talk about it on this show, I'll try to do a mini review. That movie's amazing. So he goes to the Morton's house, to Anne's house, where the senator, played by Leo G. Carroll, another Hitchcock staple, and informs. And Senator Morton informs Guy that his wife's been murdered, but we know that Guy already knows, but he pretends that he doesn't know. Anne's sister, Barbara, played by Pat Hitchcock, clearly points out that the police will think Guy did it. Touch on Pat Hitchcock real quick. I really like her in this movie. I really do. I obviously love her in Psycho for her, pithy moment in the real estate office, but she's like really good in this movie. Like she's very
she really is. I found her to stand out quite a bit as a character in this one.
Yeah, and she really plays upon like she clearly got dramatic lessons not just from the Royal Academy but also from watching her parents work. And the example is exemplified here. She's just very engaged. She feels so much like she's Ruth Roman's sister. Like there's a connection there. You can tell it, especially in that scene later on where she's crying to her. But yeah, so the police come. They get Guy to question him, and he can't confirm the alibi, which is the professor who was drunk on the train. And his professor, by the way, was John Brown, who played Digby Odell on The Life of Riley. So it's interesting to see him in real life. The police can't arrest Guy yet, though. They assign people to shadow him essentially throughout the course of his days, so that he cannot flee while they investigate him. So Bruno starts following Guy around Washington.
Wouldn't his tails have noticed he had a tail? Seems likely.
Well, they're so caught up in Guy Haines' life that that's
true.
Hennessy is very interested in Guy's life. He is very interested in Guy. He is he's so supportive that he's going to let him finish that match at the end of the movie.
Right. Yeah.
It's pretty. By the way, spoiler alert. We're going back and forth here. It's just a big old party of strangers on a train. If you haven't seen this movie, what's your problem? And amongst the things Guy's going through his day at the tennis court, we get that beautiful suspension of reality where everybody else is looking at the ball, but Robert Walker's only looking at Guy.
Right.
That just it's so obviously choreographed. It's so obviously super staged, but it's just fucking creepy and unsettling.
Yeah, definitely.
And it sets up that disassociation from reality that Hitchcock will do from time to time, where something is clearly staged, but it works so well inside the world. It fits in this movie. It's the one it's a non-noir thing in a comfortably placed in a noir film.
Right. Yeah. Definitely.
So, Barbara actually encounters Bruno at the club. Bruno's pretending to. he's speaking French, and she mistakes him for a Frenchman. And he says, "He's like it's Mr. Anthony, and he's not French." Like, that's the most important thing to relay to her, not anything else. But obviously,
nothing else.
Yeah, can't do that because obviously, then we go into the scene that we'll get into the party, which we get into this party. Bruno follows him to that party, introduces himself to Anne prior to this too. So he's in the party. Bruno decides to demonstrate what it's like to strangle somebody. And it plays into his coyish attitude when it comes to murder and that kind of macabre tone. He's clearly an unrestrained character. Prior to this, we do see him back at home in his house with his mother, who's a painting fanatic, and just being coddled to death by his mother, who cannot imagine that he would do anything wrong. We set up even more that he hates his father, and just setting up further and further Robert Walker's entitlement in the movie.
Yeah, and I think you said this earlier too. Her character is very similar to the mother in Shadow of a Doubt.
Yeah.
And just her behavior and demeanor, and very, unfortunately, kind of clueless about what's going on around her.
I think she's more in tune with what Bruno is than Emma is, but I think that she's in much more denial. Like, it's weird.
Yeah,
like, she's somehow even more worse than Emma is, because Emma is kind of ignorant by circumstance. She's just intentionally saying, "Oh, my son wanted to blow up the White House. How charming!" Like,
right?
Oh yes, a terrorist plot. How wonderful!
How positively hilarious!
Oh yes. Oh, and then he said that line. What would the president think? Like,
right.
And then I just couldn't help but laugh at my wonderfully brilliant son. Anyway. So he decides to demonstrate to this woman, played by Norma Varden, who does a great job in this scene too, how to strangle someone. And put his hands around her neck, and as he's starting to strangle her, he sees Barbara. Barbara, played by Pat Hitchcock, wears glasses and looks not too dissimilar from Miriam. So he basically blacks out, I guess it would be.
Yeah, it's almost like he gets caught up in the moment of his initial murder.
Yeah.
And loses himself in this moment where it's not supposed to be one, but almost becomes one.
And it triggers that kind of that memory of what happened, and it's been identified as like this moment to empathize with Bruno is just like he is clearly sick, because why would he identify if he knows who he clearly killed? Clearly, he has an associative disorder of sorts, or like, and amongst other things, where he's, tapping into these things and creating coincidences in his own head.
Right, and very ahead of its time too in the assessment of a killer's mind, right? Because that's those kind of patterns and things.
Yeah,
like we talked about earlier aren't established until much later.
Yeah.
in human history, but it is interesting they kind of already, were aware of that.
Yeah, we're aware of it through the narrative of film, which is kind of explaining it to it as best as we can. I mean, these pieces end up becoming much more relevant down the line in the 60s with Psycho and even Frenzy in the 70s. But he's already working with the bits and pieces of it. It's just that he doesn't... the problem with Hitchcock movies in terms of their psychological bent is that obviously they're never going to be medically accurate. Because
of course.
Because they hit in a period where there's nothing clearly diagnosable or like a terminology for it. But he gets closer than any other filmmaker to tackling this subject in this era.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and just like getting deeper into the character and what caused, or I shouldn't say caused, but getting into the character and what, showcasing something about them that is clearly, broken, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and within that, we get an earlier version of it with Joseph Cotton in Shadow of a Doubt, and in this film we get the more advanced version of it where there's even more depth to it, because Charlie is not fully explained beyond like vague notions.
Right.
Robert Walker gets a much more specific lens. It doesn't get a clinical analysis, but it gets really in deep.
Right. Well, and it even, like, you know, to that end feels like killing the wife was clearly the first time he'd killed someone.
Yeah.
You know,
but he's
and
just
that
been so
there was something
pent up.
about that rush. So when he shows, he's like, "Here's how you would do it." You know, he kind of loses control again because it's something he actually has discovered he enjoys.
Yeah, exactly.
You
And
know?
so therefore it's almost like he's confused as he is terrifying at the same time.
Right.
Barbara goes and cries to Anne that, you know, he was strangling me, you know, which she's great in that scene. She's just fucking great.
Oh,
in that scene.
so good in that
God.
scene. That's, I mean, and that she kind of realized what was going on too, which, you know, of course he's not breaking eye contact with her, which makes it pretty obvious, but
yeah,
it is a very impactful, and especially her performance after is like, it's pretty amazing. I mean, I don't like, and it's hard to wrap my head around like when this movie was made, you know, because you just think like that stuff. It's so good. Like, how did they think of that long ago? And and that we still can't like top it these days. You know, we're still kind of redoing those kinds of moments.
Yeah. And you know, this must have made Hitchcock proud to be like, oh, she fucking gets it.
Right.
So Anne confronts Guy and is just like, what the fuck's going on?
Right.
And Guy's like, all right, here's what happened. I met this asshole on a train. And he thinks we're going to swap murders. Clearly we're not, Anne, but somehow he decided that this was a go sign.
Right.
And, you know, and so Bruno ups his ante as Anne now knows what's going on, but she also knows that they can't do anything about it yet.
Right.
So Bruno sends Guy a pistol, a key, and a map showing, you know, where the father's room is. And I wanted to point this out really quick. The blueprints, or map, I should say, of Bruno to Guy. I'm wondering, with Bruno's resources at his disposal, obviously he has the wealth of like 500 brats. How could he not afford elaborate blueprints like Jay and Silent Bob, two stoners in New Jersey, when they wanted to sabotage LaFourge, the mall cop? You know, like, it's like, it's a simple doodle. It's not a big issue in the movie. I just couldn't help but notice it. I'm just like, man, like, did he draw this with a crayon?
Like, with the amount of wealth they have, it was probably a custom build. They have the blueprints laying around the house somewhere. Come on.
He could have sent an elaborate thing. If you're serious about this, Robert Walker, get me technical details. Don't draw it with the crayons that you clearly draw other like murder plots with in your bedroom.
Right.
But no, so Guy basically decides to pretend to go along with this plan. And in a scene that in the novel would turn into, you know, Guy going forward with the killing and basically embracing that duality. The intention here is that Guy doesn't intend to go along with it. And there was actually alternate shots apparently where, you know, the gun was situated a different way to suggest that he might actually go through with this. But through a series of wonderfully shot noir sequences, he gets into the room, and he's going to alert Bruno's father, only for Bruno to turn on the light and basically go, "Surprise! I knew you wouldn't have the balls to go through with this." Like, but it actually is like, I was trying to tell you my father was out, but you were in such a hurry. And within this moment, we can kind of touch on the homoerotic subtext of whatnot. Like, these two are playing a dance with each other. Like, it's Robert Walker's flirting with Guy. Like,
yeah, I mean, even
hardcore.
from the initial like foot tap at the very beginning when they meet, it does seem like there's something else happening there, and it kind of sucks in the historical context because it's that that idea of like, let's vilify the other, let's
Yeah.
vilify the person who's different than the norm.
Exactly.
It's nice that they never outright come out and say that, but it is unfortunate that they use that as a part of his character in
Yes.
this situation.
Yeah, and we've talked about this in previous episodes, especially with Rope, because that's what Rope is. That the movie Rope is about this specific angle. What I've said in those past episodes, and I'll stand by it, is that unfortunately it is of the time. What's interesting is that Hitchcock is one of the few filmmakers who will tread into that water, which I think it's interesting that he was able to get away with it.
Right. Yeah, and again, I don't, different times, obviously, we figure things out and we become more open-minded to ideas and that. So I don't discredit them for it, but it's hard to not point it out in a modern context.
Yes, from a modern lens, this is like Robert Walker is treated like a stereotypical homosexual villain, and that is not something I want to see today from my villains whatsoever, or even and most certainly not from portrayals of homosexuals in film. So Bruno basically just says like, well, I've just got to eliminate you now because you're just going to keep being a thorn in my side. And he follows Guy out of the house. Guy calls his bluff and leaves. And in this silent moment, it's one of the most suspenseful moments in the movie, in my opinion, where he's just walking downstairs and you think that guy, like that Bruno might actually do it.
Yeah, definitely. It is that moment of like, there's a lot of tension built into that scene where you really genuinely don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. And so
I feel like it could have gone either way there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it could have, and it's drawn out in such a way that, like, again, don't tell me black and white movies aren't interesting, because that moment's scary. That is super scary. And so Bruno's like, I'm not going to kill you, I'm just going to punish you for what you did. And Anne goes to Bruno's house to plead to the mother, like, hey, your son's fucking insane. And his mother's like, oh, no. Do you like painting? And so, but she basically just shrugs it off, says, no. She leaves. Bruno gets into the scene and basically taunts Anne with the fact of the cigarette lighter. And Bruno doesn't know that Anne knows what Bruno did.
Right.
And so Bruno's playing off the innocent routine of like, Guy wanted me to go grab the lighter from the amusement park because it would implicate him. And so she's aware now of the cigarette lighter, and Guy, as they meet up again, basically adds it all up that Bruno's going to go plant that lighter at the island.
Right.
And so he needs to get over to the town where the amusement park is, but he has to first finish a match. And in any other film you would probably say like, well, why do I need this distraction before going to the action? Well, he has to do it in order to not arouse the suspicion of his tails, who are also his number one fans. Or at least Hennessy is. The other cop's kind of like, why are you going to let him finish this match?
Right.
Which is kind of like, yeah, if somebody's wanted for questioning, you don't let them finish the game, right? Like,
right.
that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But whatever, it's a fucking movie. Just enjoy it, Zach. Anyway.
Well, and I think like to some extent, I find it somewhat believable because, at least for the time, and maybe I'm wrong, the portrayal in cinema of that era of society is, there's this kind of like civility and respect that even, oh, you're a criminal, but you're this known athlete, you have a match, we're going to let you finish that match, and then we'll arrest you surreptitiously after, so it doesn't become a thing, And again, I don't know if that speaks to the time at all, or if it just happens to be the the perception of it because of how the time is portrayed in cinema and books and things from that era. But to me, that didn't really bother me.
No. Actually, I just remembered OJ was notified that he was going to be apprehended, and we got a Bronco chase out of it.
Yeah, so
So there is a precedent for this.
Right. No Bronco chase in this movie, though, which is really too bad. I was looking forward to that.
No, yeah, and OJ didn't say crisscross at the trial at any point. So,
Are you sure? We should go back through the transcripts.
Oh yeah, let's just watch all the footage while we're at it. Like, because I'm fairly sure it's not in OJ Made America, which is a documentary everybody should watch. But so we basically have the cross-cutting between Bruno going back to plant the lighter and this tennis match, and talk about the most suspenseful tennis match in cinema history.
Right.
Like it's pretty. Like, I think it's Richard Schickel, who is always looks like he's on the verge of collapsing in an interview, is from exhaustion or drinking. I have no idea. He's a smart guy. He looks so exhausted every time I see him in an interview. But he's just like, I'm a tennis player, and that's some pretty damn good, as close as you can get tennis in a movie. Hitchcock constructed that from other footage and just inserts of Guy and the other player hitting the rackets. So it's a conglomeration of archive footage and the actors.
Interesting.
And it creates a pretty damn good tennis match for film.
It does, yeah. And it's funny because I don't know that you could pull that off today. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
I don't
using
think you
that kind of stock footage, and not just because it couldn't be done, but because it would be difficult to do and have someone not notice.
Yeah, and matching it up would be a nightmare. Like, I mean, like if you watch Leo McCarey's film Duck Soup, there's a wonderful scene where Groucho's calling up the armies of the world, and you see stock footage of animals and athletes running to the rescue, and it works only in that kind of movie of that era. It cannot happen anywhere else. Like,
right.
You can't do it today.
Definitely.
With this specific thing, I think our closest example of it would try to be would say I would say the Rise of Skywalker controversy with Carrie Fisher's character with Leia.
Right.
I'm talking as if though I don't know what Star Wars is. But just utilizing that footage from Force Awakens and then cross-cutting it with people on set for Rise of Skywalker. And people obviously noticed it.
Right. And
so I think it is, it's a testament to this. You can't really get away with this right now.
Right. Well, and it's hard. I mean, I understand the, the difficulty when you lose someone midway through shooting something. How do you handle that?
Right.
And I think there were other ways to do it, but here we are. So
we are not a Star Wars podcast. We've established that Hitchcock clearly advised George Lucas on Star Wars, but this is not a Star Wars podcast.
Nope.
In our own little, in my own little warped mind. So anyway, we're doing the cross-cutting back and forth between the match. As that's going on, Bruno drops the lighter clumsily into a sewer. And it's the most tense. You don't want him to lose. It's weird.
Yeah. Well, I think you don't want him to lose the lighter because that him having possession of the lighter proves that Guy was not involved.
Yes,
so
if
he loses it, then where's the evidence,
Yeah.
So it's you want him to get it, but not because you want him to get away with it. It's so there's something that can tie him to it.
Yeah, and I will support that, and then double into the fact that when you talk about a character like Bruno Antony, it's the emergence of this character that, because he's so out there and so like engaging as a villain, there's that secret part of you, and it's the same part of you that watches a Friday the 13th movie to watch somebody get killed. You're just like, oh I kind of hope he gets away with it.
Right, yeah.
And again, these films speak to the dark parts of our minds as well as like our moral center and whatnot. And again, taps into the soul of America, which, outward moral crust with a rich, dark center full of trauma and despair and mistakes that we don't acknowledge.
Right.
This is America. I'm just making it obvious now, aren't I? But Bruno gets back to the carnival. He asks the hot dog vendor what time it gets dark over there, and he says, "What's your hurry?" I like that. I love that the amusement park is now distinctly designed to upset Bruno.
Right.
He has to wait in line. He's getting sass from the hot dog vendor. He's getting into. It adds to the suspense, obviously, but if you watch it from a modern lens, it's just like, man, he is just being put upon, this guy. And it's all in the service of making sure Farley Granger gets there in time. And there's also that scene when Farley Granger is on the train and he sees two people engaging in a conversation, not unlike Bruno and him engaged in at the beginning of the movie, and he just looks away. He's just like, God, no.
Nope, not doing it.
And he's like, yeah, that's right. Sequel. Strangers on a Train 2. Those people. fucking write it. Fucking write it, Whitfield. Guy makes it to the amusement park and yells out for Bruno. They go on a chase that leads them to a carousel that then proceeds to spin out of control because the levers get broken because a pistol is shot. I'm trying to remember. It's the pistol is shot and it kills the operator. Guy. A police officer shoots at Guy, but kills the carousel operator on accident. And the guy just tumbles over the lever. Classic, oh no, I'm dead, but I'm going to take everybody out with me. And so the carousel's spinning out of control. This set piece is amazing. It's noted in the behind the scenes that the one time Hitchcock was scared on this set of something going wrong was there's a moment in this film amidst the battle going on between Guy and Bruno. The police are trying to figure out how to stop the carousel, and the most heroic old man ever, ever, this guy is just a badass. He just goes like, I can stop it. That guy had to crawl underneath an actual rotating carousel. If something goes wrong, Hitch got blood on his hands.
Right. I wondered about that because it didn't look like in the scene right after he shuts it down, you can tell it's very much a projection on a screen with people, that it's not shot simultaneously. But that scene very much looked like he was actually crawling underneath something that was spinning above him. So that's interesting to find out it was like a legitimately dangerous situation.
Yeah. It actually here. I was gonna say he worked with the editor on this film was William H. Ziegler, and they shot a majority of this with process sequences and also just an actual big ass carousel.
Mm-hmm.
For the explosion that happens, Hitchcock took a toy carousel and photographed it blown up by a small charge of explosives. So that portion is more controlled. But there is that bigger piece that's revolving around that guy's going to have to crawl under. If something goes wrong, this guy is just toast.
Right.
But he gets it, obviously, and the most courageous old man ever put to film saves the day technically, and actually with that explosion, Hitchcock had that shot undercranked to accelerate the action.
Okay.
So it's not the people had to actually crawl under the spinning ride. But it's still moving, so if something goes wrong, it falls on him. Mm-hmm. But that shot, he undercranks it so that it accelerates the action of that carousel.
Right.
So the carousel explodes and tumbles, and everybody's plopped on the ground. I don't know how many people die in this carousel.
It seems like more than one should have. So.
It's amazing that Farley Granger survives, let alone Bruno Anthony as long as he does.
Right.
I mean, this is carnage on a level that we don't see outside of The Invisible Man blowing up stock footage train and thus being the highest kill count in the monster universe. So he basically goes over to Bruno to be like, tell him what happened. As long as you can speak, tell him what happened.
Right.
And Bruno's not going to give it up. He's going to continue this game until his last breath, and then within the last gasp of it, the lighter is revealed to be in Bruno's hands. So the police get it, and they put two and two together, and it's assumed that all has been well. The last shot of the movie has Anne going to meet with him, and they go on a train together, and a priest looks up from his paper and goes, "Excuse me, aren't you Guy Haynes?" And Guy Haynes is about to speak before Anne and him look at each other and then walk away, leaving this man of God to then basically curse them forever in the pits of hell, because that's, you don't ignore a priest on a train. Like,
I do kind of love that ending though, because it's very much that, it's cheeky, but it's that acknowledgement of like, this didn't end well last time I talked to a random person on a train.
What's funny that you bring that up is because there is a preview version that was originally called the English version, but it's not English. It's just, this is a version that was previewed 2 times, and it originally ends with Anne getting the phone call that everything's going to be okay, and then it fades out there. This scene was added at the insistence of Jack Warner in the studio, and it's one of the smartest Jack L. Warner decisions I've ever seen, because this ending definitely works for the movie they've created. If you were going to do a direct adaptation of Highsmith's novel, obviously the entire ending of this movie doesn't make sense. But
right.
Because of the story we're telling where Farley Granger is a good guy, this is the best solution to the movie.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's, it's worth noting too that, I mentioned it before, but how the lighter in this situation, when it's revealed in the hand of Bruno, is what lets the police know that Guy is innocent of this, that he's being set up. Similarly, the emerald ring in Shadow of a Doubt is what lets Uncle Charlie know that, he's young Charlie's not going to give this up until he's gone. And so they both play that kind of pivotal moment in the movie of that realization, but in very different ways.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting how those objects are used to such effect, and also like the similarities in that they both have initials engraved on them, and all of that just kind of plays into the parallels between the two stories and what they.
And again, and as we've been talking about throughout the entire episode, like, these films are connected spiritually. How often it's discussed in terms of the bigger realm, I don't know, but they are eerily similar, and yet their differences are what determine not just the time that they are made, but also our appreciation for it. Because I would argue that Strangers on a Train is probably much more beloved than Shadow of a Doubt by the mainstream.
Probably, I would say so.
And I would think that Strangers on a Train, the reason why is because its imagery is a lot more on the not on the nose, but it's a lot more modern. And Shadow of a Doubt is working within a reserved aesthetic of the period where they're having to break boundary. Whereas in Shadow of a Doubt, he's already broken that boundary, so now he can push it more toward the modern aesthetic. And obviously, a lot of that macabre notion is things that he further pushes into in Psycho and then Frenzy before he, ends with Family Plot. So, like, he's always constantly pushing that boundary. But these two films specifically are very, very tied together through theme, through MacGuffin use, through character, through even plot to a certain extent, of just terms of, like, how do we stick menace into American society? Right.
I mean, even to the end climactic moment where you have the two people, wrestling on a speeding object. It's like there's these like little similarities, but then again, what I appreciate with what he does is that in Shadow of a Doubt, it's a female protagonist with a male antagonist.
Yeah.
In this, it's two male antagonists. So this idea that it can be anybody. He's not always using a Cary Grant type character as his main character.
No.
And I feel like a lot of modern filmmakers and modern directors fall into these patterns of using the same character or the same archetype of a character or the same, visual representation of a character for all of their leads.
Yeah.
And it's refreshing to see. Refreshing is the wrong word because these are older films, but it's nice to see that even in like older Hollywood, there was more diversity in, at least with what Hitchcock was doing with the kind of focal characters in the films.
Yeah, I think if anything, the similarities lie within the psychological and not within the outer tropes specifically, because you're never dealing with like, I honestly think Farley Granger as Guy is much less equipped to fight Bruno Antony apart from, let's say, young Charlie, because I think young Charlie's a little bit more clever and smart.
Right, yeah, she's much more clever. It feels like Guy is very almost clueless. Like, not clueless, but you know what I mean? He's not as clever as she is.
Right, and now part of that also is with Shadow of a Doubt, you're dealing with, like, well, Charlie and Charlie are connected because of the thing we talked about with telepathy.
Right.
As far as like that diversity of character, directors, it seems like with everything that exploded in the 70s onward, directors have an identity, and so they match their actors to that identity as best they can. And I'm struggling to think of a director who really tosses it up in the air a lot. Because it does seem like they all kind of fall into a pattern. Like, Quentin Tarantino characters are Quentin Tarantino characters, and he may do something different with them each time, but they are essentially similar characters.
Right. And I think we see that, a lot of modern directors, it's like there's a lot of, it's like, oh, if a director has a fast-talking, quippy lead character, every movie they make, their lead character is a fast-talking, quippy character.
Yeah,
it just kind of falls into that.
And that's certainly not disrespect to Quentin Tarantino, because I will say that each film he finds a way to make it interesting for the audience who's coming in new or coming in for another dose of Tarantino stuff. Like, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Rick Dalton is not a typical Tarantino character. Like, he's a self-loathing, mess.
Right.
So this movie premieres in 1951, after the death of Robert Walker, R.E.P., and it receives mixed reviews upon release. Variety said, performance-wise, the cast comes through strongly. Granger is excellent as the harassed young man innocently involved in murder. Ruman's role is a nice, understanding girl is a switch for her, and she makes it warmly effective. And Walker's role has extreme color, and he projects it deftly. But then we have Bosley Crowther of the New York Times. Oh, Bosley. You don't want to talk about how Bosley really likes Shadow of a Doubt, right? So here's how I know that Bosley Crowther doesn't. He's either very bored with Hitchcock or just doesn't know how to really critique. Because he says about this film, Mr. Hitchcock, again, is tossing a crazy murder story in the air and trying to con us into thinking that it will stand up without support. Perhaps there will be those in the audience who will likewise be terrified by the villain's darkly menacing warnings and by Mr. Hitchcock's sleekly melodramatic tricks. But for all that, his basic premise of fear fired by menace is so thin and so utterly convincing that the story just does not stand. Now, Aaron, we talked about how these two films are essentially running on very, very similar tracks, right? Train tracks,
right,
if you will. And yet somehow the same man who was going, Shadow of a Doubt's incredible, is suddenly looking at Strangers on a Train going like, meh.
Right. Well, because honestly, it's so weird to me because I think the murder plot in Strangers on a Train even holds up today. This idea of like, we met by crazy random happenstance, and I'm going to kill the person you want, and you kill the person I want, and no one will know because nothing connects the two of us.
We still do this to this day. Like, we still have this trope all over the thriller genre and even through the gangster genre, to be honest, too.
Right. So to me, it's like that doesn't seem like, and even stepping outside of the idea of we've seen it a lot to this day, to me it seems like a perfectly viable and well thought out plot, particularly with how connected he is, the guy is to who, Bruno murders. It's his, wife, who he was supposed to be getting a divorce from, who suddenly doesn't want a divorce now. Yeah. And Guy being, not a completely inept protagonist, knows that people saw him in confrontation with his ex-wife, that he told his, the woman he's seeing now over the phone that he just wanted to strangle her. Like, he's aware that it does not look good for him in this situation. Like, to me, it's a very reasonable, like, I don't know if I should go to the police or not kind of moment.
I think that Patricia Highsmith's opinion might give Bosley Crowther some levity here.
Yeah. So
Patricia Highsmith, author of the novel. I'm going to read from the Wikipedia entry because it covers a couple different quotes here. So Patricia Highsmith's opinion of the film varied over time. She initially praised it, writing, "I am pleased in general, especially with Bruno, who held the movie together as he did the book." But later in life, still praising Robert Walker, she criticized the casting of Ruth Roman and Hitchcock's decision to turn Guy from an architect into a tennis player, and the fact that Guy did not murder Bruno's father as he did in the novel. So Crowther is basically saying, I've seen this before, right?
Right.
Now, if he had followed the novel to the letter, he probably would have been singing a different tune, because that turn for Bruno, or for Guy, is very essential to the duality that we're dealing with in this story, regardless of how it ends now. And my guess is that it probably would have been a more challenging film of the era. It also would have never gotten made because you could not get away with your hero suddenly shooting somebody.
Right, yeah, he had to be, in that time, you needed to have someone who was not morally gray.
Yeah, it's Hitchcock put into a corner that he's been put in before with stuff like Suspicion, and other projects that he tried to get off the ground that had this similar bent. It's not until 1960 where he's just like, let me put $800,000 into this trash horror book that I found in the airport, and I will make it fucking blow your mind. Because that's when you get Marion Crane suddenly being killed, and suddenly this nice motel man is suddenly your killer. So right. He had to change these things over time. It's why he's the innovator, and these are the stepping stones towards it.
Right, and I think too, like when you look at something like, the author's critique of changing Guy's profession from an architect to a tennis player, to me, it seems more realistic that Bruno would recognize an athlete on a train than an architect, right? Well, like he's more in the spotlight as an athlete. So from a storytelling perspective, I think it works better that he's an athlete than an architect.
But you forget, architects were the shit back in the 40s. Like, everybody was just
That's true.
reigning over architects. Like, it's one of the reasons why How I Met Your Mother, like the Ted character, I find suspicious at times, because I'm just like, there's no way an architect's this successful, like, or this famous in this day and age, like the way he's aspiring to it. So, like,
right, yeah, like that's not a thing that happens anymore.
But it's fine.
I guess at the time I could see it, but
exactly. But it's fine now because Neil Patrick Harris says legendary. So
right, so we're all good.
Yeah. So
God, that
wraps
show.
up this.
Don't even get me started on How I Met Your Mother. But anyway.
This is not the How I Met Your Mother podcast.
No, this is the wrong podcast. We'll do that later.
No, that'll be on the Jason Segel career review that I'll do 40 years later.
Jesus.
I will do it.
Oh, God. Do it. I'll come on that, too. We'll talk Jason Segel.
There's going to be a 5-hour episode on the Muppets and how it's awesome. But anyway, so that wraps up this noir double feature of things that are crisscrossing and yet connecting all together at the same time. So after watching Shadow of a Doubt for the first time and kind of talking this over, like, do you still find Strangers on a Train to be superior for you, or is that? And then I'm assuming if so, that might just be because it's connected to you a little more. But
yeah, I would say my preference is probably still Strangers, just because it's, kind of the original of his works that I'd seen and been like, oh, this is super cool and interesting and a good story. And but seeing Shadow of a Doubt, I can understand why he says it's one of his favorite movies that he's done, because it really is a very, all around just a tight and well-made movie. And honestly, up until the very end, I wasn't sure he was going to get caught, or not even caught, but you don't know what's going to happen. I even had a moment where I thought, oh man, he's going to end up killing young Charlie and getting away, and that's going to be the end, and we don't know what ends up happening to him.
No, they won't let me do that.
Yeah, so
They're really mean.
I will say for that, I found myself really on edge up until the very last moment where he falls in front of the oncoming train, of just what's going to happen? How's he going to get caught? How is this going to resolve in a way that's not, unsatisfying?
Right.
So I think that's really a very masterfully done film and story. But again, just it's hard to
it's hard to ignore Strangers on a Train. It's got Robert Walker in it, and that performance is I don't want to say it's Joker level, but it's Joker level.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like anything else. If you have a book or a video game or a TV show that you loved as a younger person, and then you find a similar thing from the same artist or a similar artist that's purportedly the better version of something, you're still always going to have that kind of fondness for that thing you grew up with,
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's kind of how I feel about this. I'd seen it early enough in my life to kind of form this connection of oh man, that's a really clever story.
Yeah. And it's not, and believe me, I saw both of these later on, so they weren't my informative Hitchcocks. But so my lens was more grafted towards okay, what, I was looking at it from an adult lens. Shadow of a Doubt for me is my pick of these two, but I could easily watch these both back to back again because they work so well in tandem. But Shadow of a Doubt, I feel like it has this odd feeling of being the perfect entrance into the Hitchcock of America. And on top of that, though, let's disregard the American element that we've been talking about this whole time. This is a straight up great psychological thriller, diving into the minutia of small town living and what happens when a menace creeps in. It doesn't have to be America; it could be anything. It could be simple as a monster entering a small European village in Transylvania, for all we know. It's the translation of that kind of European storytelling, Gothic storytelling, into an American psychological thriller bent story. And you've got both of these films have Alma Revel and her hands very much involved in this, and I do feel like I cannot wait to talk about Alma with our guest for that episode, because discussing things like this, it's clear that her touch is involved in a lot of those, a lot of the ones that people really hold in high regard. And in Shadow of a Doubt, I just feel like everybody's firing on all cylinders in that movie. There's not a frame in Shadow of a Doubt I would remove,
and
whatsoever.
I think too with Shadow of a Doubt, you're constantly kind of in this state of fear of it's not safe, right? The monster is in the house and you don't know when it's going to strike.
Yeah.
Whereas with Strangers on a Train, you have some separation from the monster and you feel like there's moments where you're safe and you can kind of reset what's going on. Whereas that movie, you never really get a break. Once she finds out who Uncle Charlie is and he knows she knows, it's just you're now trapped in this space with her. And that, I think, is done very effectively in that movie, and in a way that Strangers on a Train could never capture, because it's a different setting and context.
It's more jet setty too. Strangers on a Train is a little bit more jet setty, and and this, I think one of the reasons why I may also prefer Shadow of a Doubt is I'm a big John Carpenter fan, and one of the reasons I like Carpenter is because he creates a scale out of intimacy. And in Shadow of a Doubt, we are confined to this small town outside of the one scene at the beginning. Right. And we are just left in this world with these guys. And like as you said, the monster is inside and we don't know when he's going to strike. And it's one of the perfect examples of, what Hitchcock said I fucked up with in Sabotage with the kid dying. This is how the bomb goes off the right way.
Right.
This is how the bomb goes off correctly. And it's masterfully that fuse lasts all the way till almost the final moments of the movie.
Right.
Which is incredible. So that will wrap it up for this noir discussion that we had. There was a lot of shadows in our discussion. We had a lot of seedy characters. We had a discussion about how it affects this land that we live in that's currently going through a different type of dark period.
Right.
But Aaron, as always, thank you for coming down for this. Depending on how the flow of everything goes, we could probably stick you in one more time before the series ends. But obviously, you'll be back for more podcasting with me because I can't imagine not doing shows like this without you and just your insight into how you read film. It's always a pleasure, sir.
Thanks. Yeah, I love being a part of it, and thanks for having me as always.
Yeah,
and happy to come on whenever to chat about films.
Oh yeah, and don't worry, I'll have plenty for you down the line. So that's going to be it for the Shamley Silhouette this time around. You can find more on the Shamley Silhouette at realnerdspodcast.com. Episodes will be coming out as of now still twice a month, but I'm going to try to see if I can accelerate that a little bit further so that we can hit our end date, which might be Hitchcock's birthday. You never know, guys. I'm going to work on some revival of the articles as time is going on. I'd like to first get all the episodes in the can. On the next Shamley Silhouette, we're going to have another return guest. He's known for his lengthy rhetoric, and we've given him 3 more films to tackle, and we're also going to have him talk about a classic Hitchcock film. So you'll get 3 misses and a hit. So, but until next time, good night.
With all of the splendid dignity
I'm glad you were able to come, Jack. I couldn't have faced it without someone who knew.
He came into our community and our lives were finer and richer.
I did know more. I couldn't tell you.
I know.
To you who loved him most,
He thought the world was a horrible place.
while you knew him best.
Couldn't have been very happy ever.
To you, his
No.
beloved family. Let this
He didn't trust
make him
people.
calm in this sad
He seemed to
hour of
hate
grief.
them. Hated the whole world.
Let no true love ever die.
You know, he said that people like us had no idea what the world was really like.
That as, long after the
Well, it's
storm
not
is
quite as
over,
bad as that. But sometimes it needs a lot of watching.
we feel it
Seems to go crazy every now and then.
so the memory of the lives of our
Like your Uncle Charlie.
the beauty of their souls, the sweetness of their characters live on with us forever.